Okay, good evening. Welcome to Freeport High School. It is Wednesday, November 8th, 2017. You will notice we have a new person to my right. Maddie Vertenten was elected to the board from Freeport yesterday. Lindsay Sterling was re-elected. Welcome back. And we also have one of our two student representatives with us this evening, Carter. You told me and I've already messed it. Jedri Irvin. See, you're doing a great job. So, welcome to our new folks. And Naomi is excused this evening for illness, and Jeremy will be joining us shortly. So we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, adjustments to the agenda. We do have one. We're going to be adding something at the beginning of new business. What are we calling it?
So we're adding 6D, discussion on pesticide application at Durham Community School, but we're moving it to the top so that it can go first under new business. And then we're also rearranging the order under the workshop, and we're going to do the testing assessments after the guidance program.
Okay.
All right.
So
Thank
try
you.
and keep up, people. We're moving it all around tonight. Okay, so we're going to start with public comment. Will quickly sat down. He has nothing to say in public comment. Okay, now you can go, Will.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Are you dropping this down?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll that way.
This is probably not the slideshow you're expecting to see. It's just bugs, grubs. And all I'm doing is providing the pictures.
What was the other bad one? You did another bad one. Yeah.
No. Hold on a minute. I was not inviting judgment on like all previous presentations. For heaven's sake. It's the first one on grubs, Lindsay, I assure you. So if I'm not showing you this, it's just the projector's just warming up a little bit here. Maybe we can just drop that front light down. So if you were to head up to Durham right now, which is what Jeremy actually did, but the that's perfect right there. Thank you. The front circle on the bus turnaround. This is a picture of that. This is what it looks like. And if I didn't take any pictures out back of the school around the garden, the orchard, that area, but very similar. And so over the last few weeks, it's just been getting more and more sort of damaged. And so Jason and Dennis are going to kind of explain it more, but they came up to check it out and to give you a sense of it. You see where that's not shadow and light, where there is shadow from the building, but where you see the green, that's what it all looked like not very long ago. So that's dead grass, and it's from an infestation of grubs. And when you see it sort of dug up there in that sort of bottom right-hand side, that's how what's been happening is animals at night, but a lot of crows in the morning. It's so there's no root system left, so they can just come in, and it's so soft. I mean, that was this morning. I just dragged my foot across a piece of it. It just moves right aside. Those are 3 or 4 grubs right there. I mean, that's how sort of dense the infestation is. I'll pass some around if you like. That's what you were thinking. That's right. That's what it was when we did the science slides, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I just remembered. I'm not quite sure there's a worm, just for human interest. But that's just the problem we've got going, and it's just accelerated like crazy. So anyway, Dennis and Jason really are the experts on this. I'm just give you a context for it. But I appreciate them being so responsive to checking it out and then trying to come up with a response.
So I'm Dennis, Facilities Director in Transportation. This is Jason Chisholm. He's our Fields and Ground keeper. He's had his pesticide license since 1998, and he's had his master's pesticide license since 2006, so he comes with some pretty good credentials. So I'm going to let him do most of the talking on grubs. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So the time to treat this is now. We're running out of time. Once the ground freezes, they drop about a foot down, and they get bigger, they grow, and we can't treat them unless they're close to the surface. And the slide that Will showed shows us that they're still at the surface. Once we get into late November, early December, when they go the foot down, the product that we've chosen won't work. When they go a foot down, they overwinter and they get bigger and they get stronger. So when spring arrives, they come back up. We could treat them in the spring also, but they're bigger and they're stronger. And the research that I've done and the experience that I've had with grubs, they're harder to treat in the spring. You almost have to do 2 applications. So if we can do this now, it's 1 application. There's 2 products that we can treat this with. One, we're staying clear of. It has there's 4 signal words on a label, and there's 2 products that work. One has a danger label, and it works, but it's danger, and it's the highest out of all the numbers. Dennis and I have chose Arena. It's number 2 on the level label. I've never used this product. I've always used 4 because I know it works, but I understand that school grounds, him and I, we searched for something different, and we ran across Arena, which I then took the next step and got in touch with a resident expert. Our supplier told us that there's one company that they use that they buy this all the time, and they use it all the time. So I have talked to him, God, more than my girlfriend this week. Him and I have been on the phone nonstop, and he said it works. He said it works, and he uses it and it works. Same thing here. He reiterated, do it now while the soil temperatures are still where you want them, before they bury themselves down. Don't try to do it in the spring, because now you're going to be asking the school board for 2 applications. He said that when he uses Arena, he'll do an application at a residence, and he said he's always back for that second one. In the fall, right now, we have like a 1 to 2 week window left. He said it's 1 application, and come spring, problem solved. We'd take that after and we'd overseed it, fertilize it, and we'd be back in business, hopefully. We should be.
We researched organic products today as well. We came up with 2 products, Milky Spore and beneficial nematodes. Unfortunately, both of those products are temperature sensitive, so it's too late to put. You have to have 40 degrees at night to put down nematodes, and the soil needs to be 55 degrees to use Milky Spore. So we're kind of out of that market now. That's why we chose this product, because it's the lesser of the evils. I mean, you know, pesticides, IPM teaches us that we don't want to do this, but we have to do this. It's really to that level now. Yeah. And this came on within maybe the last 2 weeks. It's amazing how fast those birds and skunks and raccoons tore that up.
So Milky Spore, it sounds okay, but it's unaccomplishable for what we want to do. We want to say like it's labor intensive, but we also don't want to look like we don't want to put in the work to do it. It's unaccomplishable, because the way you apply that is you drill 12-inch holes every foot and you dump the product down in it, and you have to do it in a grid, and you have to cover. Milky Spore is made for somebody with a small lawn at their home, and it's made to do it over time, because you have to build up Milky Spore in the soil, and we haven't built up anything here. And just that area right there, I mean, it's unaccomplishable. It wouldn't work. Nematodes, Nobody above New York uses them. It doesn't, they haven't found nematodes or any nematode that lives in our soil that can live long enough to do damage to any grubs. It's weird with our temperatures that New York and down, and even the guy in New York, I talked to the guy from Yukon, and he straight up said, don't do anything above us. I can't believe you're even making this phone call, because they don't survive in your soils. They do down south, and they've seen success with them down south, but he said, you can call your suppliers, you can see if you can purchase them, but they're probably gonna laugh. So I did. I called the company that we go through, and they said, he laughed, and this is exactly, he said, nematodes, we don't stock them, we don't sell them.
No, they're microscopic bugs there, and you apply them actually with a hose. They come through with a powder, and you apply them with a sprayer and a hose. It mixes with water.
Yeah,
and you have to water them in, and they're sensitive to light, so they die in the sunlight, the bright sunny days.
Yeah, you can't put them out in the sunlight. You have to do it when it's cloudy or just before dark, and then you have to water them in. You also, one big thing with nematodes is you got to find out what you have first. We know we have grubs. We don't know if they're the Japanese beetle or they're the European Schaefer grubs. Nematodes work well with European Schaefers. They don't work so well with white grubs. We don't know what we have until we send it up to an entomologist and say, well, which one do we have? So even if we were down by New York, time sensitive, we're running out of time. It's just, we brought nematodes up in front of you all because we know people talk about nematodes a lot, but Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, it's not the place for nematodes, but we just wanted to show you guys that we did our research.
And as a preventative, this is the first step. And you might want to talk about the cultural practices moving forward. Yeah. So, I don't know if you...
Yeah, so this is step one, and we want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So what I would do as the applicator is I would apply arena. Legally, I would put the signage out properly. I would time it around rain. This product needs to be watered in. We chose arena for another reason, because there's a 12-hour re-entry period. A lot of the stuff's 48 hours. This is only 12, because it's caution label. So that benefits everybody that's involved. Within 12 hours after being watered in, students, parents, people can go back on it. So once this is applied and we've knocked the population down to almost, let's say, 95%, as we move forward, there's a product called acelepryn. Now, what Dennis and I have decided to do, if it's okay, and this is what I have done my whole entire career in turf management, is areas that have been hit before in the past, I apply either April vacation or the first day that school gets out. I apply a fertilizer with acelepryn in it. It's 0.2% of the bag. It's not even a full percentage of the bag. It's a pre-emergent grub control. So what it does is it stays in the soil, gets watered in, and then when the grubs come out of the ground and they fly out as beetles, they come back and lay their eggs. This is already in the soil. It's 2.25% of a bag. It takes out and kills all the eggs, so they don't have a chance to form into grubs. Does it kill them all? No, but this will never happen again. If you look at the baseball and softball field, when you get up there, the softball field looks like Hadlock. There's a reason it does, because we don't treat the grounds like we do the athletic fields. They're night and day. They're two totally different things. But at this school, I mean, I think now we have to at least do this for 2 years. We knock them down with arena. We use a fertilizer with acelepryn in it, with a small percentage of a pre-emergent. We treat the whole grounds and everything. Should be all set. One application, either April vacation or in the summer. We do it next year, and then maybe we start going every other year after that. But the pre-emergent application, it won't affect anybody, because it'll either be done in the summer or it'll be done on a vacation. April vacation, which is 10 days, 2 weeks, a week. So you can, the state of Maine allows you to do it either on a vacation, and they always say April, or summer break. They allow you to do applications without calling everybody in the state, letting them know.
The arena, would you be just treating the areas where you're seeing this, huge, or is it all of the field?
Well, That's the difference. So there's two products, Arena and Dialogues. And we chose Arena because with Arena you're able to treat the target spot and then a little bit around the edges just to make sure that we're okay. With Dialogues, which is the product that we didn't choose strategically, that you can only treat what's there. So yeah, with Arena we're allowed to treat it and then do a little bit around the edges just to make sure we get it all, which is what I would do because I don't want to do this. We're all involved in this now, do this, and then miss a little bit. And then all of a sudden it starts getting rototilled in another section. So me personally, I would like to make sure we hit the target pass, do a little bit around all the adjacent areas. Whatever I do is going to be flagged. I have all the flags at the shop. They have all, it'll have the label on it, it'll say the re-entry time. And I would just make sure that the border is wide enough of where I spread, even though it won't look like I spread there because there's still green grass there, I'll still flag it. And I'll make sure that everybody knows what's been treated.
More than flag it, would you be able to rope off the perimeter to keep kids out?
Well, the state law says flagging it. I would go above and beyond with the flags. I would definitely, I know we have the flags to do it. I could go above and beyond with the flags. Roping might be a little bit tougher because there's a pretty, that picture didn't do any justice. There's a pretty big area. It's all over the right side of the school. Goes quite a long shot.
Well, I think we could do it near the playground where kids are really prevalent, but the front of the school where it's just grass, maybe around the bus circle, some of those areas, but where the kids are often,
My concern being that it's a caution label, like you said.
Right.
These are 8th graders and
Yep.
younger.
Yep.
Not always great at reading signs.
Yep.
Right.
Stopping and paying attention.
So I would say that, I know we're sort of like spread out here, the children are never in the bus circle. And at the back of the school, it's very easy for us to just say to staff, that's not a sort of thoroughfare or a route to the playground, anything else. That's where we have the garden, the orchard, some ropes course, activities that are teacher-led. And we can certainly say, within over the 12-hour window, for example, it would be, we're not accessing the back of the school at this point. And I think that for the areas that have to be hit, that because, as Jason said, the sports fields are treated differently, so they're not impacted by this right now. Those are the ones that are closest to the playground. So really the areas we're talking about are not really where children go, and that back side of the school, we would just say, we're not using the back side of the school for a couple of days. And it wouldn't be people suddenly randomly wandering back there.
Yeah. So the application process too I wouldn't do it, if we got approval and we did the 5-day notification, I wouldn't do it until we knew it was gonna rain that night. So if it was gonna rain next Wednesday night, I would be at that school when everybody was loading the bus. They would be long gone. I'd say, let's hit it. I'd flag it, hit it, would do the rain dance, make sure it's gonna rain. It would water it in. If it waters it in at midnight that night, we're only 12 hours from that point. So nothing's gonna be done unless it's done strategically with weather. If it's gonna be sunny for the next 2 weeks, we're not gonna do it.
Yeah, we can't.
We may miss the window and everything may
We don't have
freeze.
enough water to do it. So.
Yeah,
So it needs a real soaking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cultural, that's a practice.
So
Realistically, if it rains on a Friday night, that's probably the best course of action.
and if it's
but-
gonna rain on a Wednesday and rain on a Friday, I'm gonna wait till Friday to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, and again.
and we've done this before.
Right.
We did it on the field hockey field one time. And it really works, but it's just, it's scary for people, so we wanted to bring this out.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the fact that last year we had a discussion about pesticides being applied, and we did hear from a lot of people who were really concerned.
Right.
Preferable, the organic option is always the one we want to go with. So I wanted to ask, if you waited until the spring, would either of the two organic options work? You said that the nematodes can't be applied here because it's too cold. Is it because of this time of the year, or if you waited until the spring, then you could apply those?
What I've been told is, even in the summer, there's something in our soils that just don't work. They just don't work right now. They might in 5 years from now, and a lot of it is weather-based, where if you wait till spring, and it may be a very beautiful spring day, but at night it gets down to like 30 degrees. So let's use some easy numbers. The $4,000 they just spent on nematodes, they're gone. in one night because we got one cold night. And eventually, these things are so large in the spring that they don't get affected by it anymore. They don't even get affected by nematodes. And then all of a sudden, they just hatch and fly out anyways, and they become beetles. So spring is tough. Spring is really, really, really tough. And so to answer that with an easy one, I don't think it's going to work in the spring. Not organically. Even if we went with a control product like Arena, we're already being told that it could take 2 applications because they're so tough in the spring. And they're at that last stage where now they're saying, we're full-grown adults, we're busting out of this and we're coming out as beetles now. And then, I mean, even that, you can kiss the shrubs goodbye in Durham, because that next life cycle is, look, we got one that kills the turf. The next one, all of his shrubs will be completely destroyed because they feed on the leaves. So when they come out, they don't go far. I mean, they fly right to the front of the school, and every time people, there's going to be beetles all over the shrubs. They're going to destroy every shrub, then they fill right back up, and then they fly back over, and they lay a ton of eggs. The whole process starts over again. Unless you get rid of them, they're always going to be, they don't fly far. So shrub damage is, it's inevitable.
Okay.
Come spring.
All right. So we should tell everyone that that would be a scenario that would occur unless we apply this pesticide.
Principal eaten by crazy grubs is the next headline.
There's somebody else pitching tremors here.
But the other question I had is, after you apply this pesticide Arena, you said that you would have to apply pre-emergent, and that is another toxic.
What we would offer up, the next best procedure to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because no one's saying that we're going to get them all. There's probably grubs on the baseball field. There's not enough where the crows waste their time there, but it will get worse over time. So what we would propose is that, yeah, we would probably do it for 2 years. We would do grounds and all the fields, but it's such a small percentage that it's just enough, and it only works with their eggs. It's such a small percentage that it would never work with a grub. They look at it and laugh. They crawl right by it.
So
But
is there an organic alternative to the pre-emergent?
Not for that either.
Oh.
Grubs we're not at that. 20 years from now, I'll probably still be here, but we'll probably be singing a different tune. But the pre-emergent acelepryn is such a small percentage that it only affects the eggs, and it only affects them. You have a short window to apply that, and it affects them at the smallest stage. If they get any bigger, even the acelepryn doesn't work. But that's why we would choose that, though, because it's less invasive.
And I think we're going to spend some time this winter getting prepared for this spring. So, we don't. I've called into MOFGA, Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners, and Maine Cooperative Extension, and I haven't had a return call from them yet. But we spent a lot of time on this, so we'll do a lot of research over the winter. Just maybe there's a better option come spring or early summer.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you for
the
spending the
brown-tailed
time.
moths are not far from our minds, believe us. Were they?
Yeah.
Or our minds,
Yeah.
believe us.
Yeah, that was a lesson that I think we've learned.
This is a granular product we'd use too. So when you apply it, there's no drift concerns. It goes right down. It rains within a few hours later. It's in the soil. It's gone. We don't. It's something that we won't see again. With a spray tank, and a lot of people put it out with liquid. Liquid works great too, because you don't have to water in. Once it dries, it's done. But you got to be concerned about drift. So again, we have spray tanks, but we chose the granular because it's less apt to drift, and less apt to drift into the little water ravines that are down the road. So we're trying to do everything.
Plus, we talked about pollinators. There's not a lot of pollinators present this time of year.
Yeah.
So that's a plus for doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis.
We batted this around for a good 6 hours today.
This is going to be gross, but I have to ask. Just because it's due diligence. I mean, you said you pushed your the dirt over with your shoe. You could see them, and we all saw them in the picture. I mean, like, could you manually, not you two, but like, could we have like a whole bunch of volunteers who don't want pesticides to come out and just, what, you know,
Wow.
Kids on detention.
Probably 50,000 bugs in the
50,000?
ground. Oh, probably, yeah.
If you're
Probably
gonna-
more.
If you're gonna do that, we'll give you the Milky Sport too. You can put that down because that's gonna go almost everywhere where there's a grub. So hold on, this is a good idea.
I don't think that's realistic.
What about something mechanical that could do it? It looks like you're going to have to re-sod the whole thing anyway, right?
Well, no, what we'll do is we'll reseed after, in the spring.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we
it
won't
looks like the
resod.
lawn is gone anyway.
Yeah, a lot of it is.
But could
yeah.
you use something mechanical to rake them almost?
Could you hire the raccoons?
No.
I think this is our
Hire raccoons?
Yeah, not that I've ever seen. There's nothing mechanical that sifts the dirt or the sod or what's existing and then pulls the grub. I haven't seen anything. It's a good idea. If anybody ever invented it.
Entrepreneurs.
There you go.
But if you think about what you just said, like, can you hire the raccoons? They're think about what they eat every night, what the birds eat. They're constantly, they're there right now. They're eating, and they're still, you move the dirt around and you get
It's still
10
there.
or 12 every square foot. But
Oh.
they're, every night we have helpers. I mean, they're eating them, but they're also doing damage to the turf. But they're just constantly feeding skunks, raccoons, crows. We're
Crows are
getting
the
nowhere.
worst, really.
Yeah, we're getting nowhere. Nowhere quick. What
Can
they
you
do.
tell us what the third option was? Which was the, is there some sort of like coyote you could put up?
All right, yes. You could get a coyote decoy and put it out there like they do at Gillette Stadium in their practice field. But nobody thought that was a good idea.
Well,
It works, but it's only,
Doesn't get rid of the grass, it just gets rid of them.
it works keeping the birds off it though, but you still have dead grass really, because they eat the roots of the grass. And it's,
How far or close is this to the water system? Is anything,
oh no, it's not even, nowhere's near. The water system's on the other side of the field.
so that, like, stuff that is in that section there, that's the wells for the geothermal system, not the drink?
Right.
They're self-contained, they're closed.
Yeah.
They're not, there's a closed loop system.
Yeah, the geothermal's closed loop anyway, but, yeah, no, it's not.
What
The well
about
is
the garden
140
section?
feet down.
The what?
at
The
bottom.
garden?
The garden
The
section?
garden section is affected, to be honest with you. I don't know how we'll deal with that.
it is, but anything that's near the gardens, I'm gonna do by hand. Everything else is gonna be done with a bigger spreader. The apple trees that are on that corner, this arena is actually labeled for apple trees. It's labeled for insects that affect flowering apple trees. They don't want you putting this down when stuff's flowering, which it isn't, but this is labeled to help. I say help. If something's affecting the apple trees, this takes care of that too. So I'm not afraid to go around and put it around the base of the apple trees. And yes, they're gonna flower and they're gonna grow apples at some point, but this arena is made for apple trees. Anything that's around those beds, though, I'm not gonna get near, other than with a push spreader. I'm gonna make sure I'm far enough away from it. And
So will any of these drain into any streams? Because it says here that aquatic and vertebrate organisms would be affected by it.
We
So
won't be putting them down near any streams. There's a
Okay.
stream further down, but we won't be anywhere near that.
right, and if you want to talk about runoff, I mean,
And
you're-
runoff, we have
yeah, the
stormwater management, so the runoff goes into the
Right.
stormwater
Okay.
management.
directs it into those if there ever was any. But we're not going to be putting down
No.
enough product
We're
to
not
ever get.
dumping bags and bags of this stuff.
Right. What's going to get put down is going to get used. It's going to work, and then once it does its job, it doesn't take long after that. A few rainstorms and it's out of the system. I mean, it gets diluted, it breaks down, it moves around in the soil a little bit, and it's part of life after that.
So are there food products in the gardens?
Not now.
Will there be,
We do plant obviously in the springtime, and that's why Jason was saying that he would be working around that. And to be honest with you, what's on the garden right now is just a big old pile of compost that we just delivered.
Right, but will it affect compost, maybe use the compost, or are there long-term?
No, it really shouldn't.
I don't think it, well, I don't know.
I don't think it should it?
Felt like if he was
I mean, there's not a lot of drift.
around the area,
It's granular.
not-
Yeah, it's granular.
There's no runoff.
It's not like you get a lot of drift with this product. It's granular, so
Yeah, where I
kind
put
of
it is where it's
leaches
going to work.
down in.
Right, it's not going to be anywhere near the beds. I mean, if we were using a liquid, yeah, you get a little bit of drift, it could. But again, by the time they fire these beds up again, there's going to be so much that's happening to these beds. They're going to be tilled, they're going to be moved, there's going to be rain, snow. There's just time, sunlight. Sunlight's a killer for pesticides.
I would feel more comfortable if you waited to hear or continued to call MAFCA and the extension just on those products, see what they say about those, see if they have other ideas that, you know, we haven't
have
found.
5 days to do that. We're kind of because we can't do anything for 5 days anyway.
Yeah, so we can contact them in 5 days. I mean, I
Sure.
would just really like their perspective because they.
Well, we plan on doing that
Yeah.
anyway. I mean, we're not cowboys here.
The call's in. Dennis
Yeah.
he's actually spoke with somebody from there, and they were very helpful. We just
Yeah.
went to the resident expert that said, this is the person, and he called him, left a pretty good, he actually rambled on and on and on, like I'm doing.
I'm sure.
And he goes, I think I talked too much. I go, no, you did good. But he did good. He left a very detailed message, and there's no way that he won't get a call back within
Tomorrow,
today.
probably.
Yeah,
So.
no way.
I mean, we
So-
spent a lot of time on this today, believe me. We tried to turn over every rock that we could on all of this
Grubs
stuff.
under all of them.
There were. Unfortunately, there were, but, you know, we'll wait 5 days if you want to email, if you want us to email you and tell us, because we really don't want to wait to, any longer than that, but I will be happy to email anybody on the board or all of you guys to,
Yeah, I would love to hear
Okay.
the response.
no problem.
I mean,
So I think the plan is to like go ahead and notify parents and start posting tomorrow.
Right.
Because they need to have 5 day notice, and it wouldn't be hard to say, oh, we've changed our mind, or because of the rain or because of the weather we're not doing it, but we have to get the notification out. So
Yes.
that's our plan, and we just wanted to kind of bring you
Find
up
out
to
it's-
speed about what we're planning to do around it.
So Becky, you're saying that you will post and advertise as this is the plan, but in the meantime, Dennis will try to contact the extension and MOFGA and who else can help. And if another option comes along, then we may switch track. Otherwise, if the conditions are what you want to have, then you would apply this
That's correct.
arena.
Because we're worried about the weather getting colder at
And it
this
might
point.
and it might be a product that they would recommend other than this. We found that with the brown tails, we went with that Entrust product. I mean, it's a good idea to contact these people anyway. And we'll be glad to do that. We're absolutely gonna do that. The calls are in, we just don't have it, and we need to move, and that's why we're here.
So arena or safer?
Yes, yeah.
Having done the Master Gardener program, I know that they have some terrific entomologists in the cooperative extension
Yeah.
at UMaine, and they may be able to identify whatever this is, the species, if it's Japanese beetle or something else. And then they may be able to give you recommendations specific to whatever that is.
And Arena doesn't discriminate, it takes care of both of those. The nematodes is what discriminates, and the nematodes say, well, you know, we'll take care, they take care of one or the other. And we don't really know what it is, but to use Arena, we don't need to know what it is because they're both grubs of a beetle, and Arena takes care of both of them. So, and they both do a ton of damage. They're equal in damage of what they do. They look the same, the grub looks the same, even the beetle itself looks the same.
So regardless of which product is used in the end, I think a great communication plan is essential. So if whatever is chosen is described in great detail and explain why it was chosen, I think that would be
Right.
helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just in that same vein, that you called MAFCA, that
Yeah.
every rock was turned over so that
Right.
they know the due diligence was really done.
Right. Yeah. We took those lessons.
That's why you're
Thank you.
lucky at both of us.
Okay.
I'm not, well, wait, I'm the pesticide guy, I have the license, he's the organic guy, so we work good together.
I like organics, I use them at home.
I don't use them in my house, so we work good together.
Thank you.
All right, I've got a few slides of the snake problem now.
Okay. Oh, you did? Because I kept looking back and it was up, and then I looked back and it was down, so you're good. Okay. All right, so 6A, which was added to your, the paper is purple. I think it was an addition to your package in your folders. Consideration and approval of the committee of members for the RSU 5 Strategic Planning Advisory Committee. So these are based on the charge that we provided, I don't know, a month ago. The request went out to members of the community, and these are the folks that responded back.
And we did have more responses than we had places for, so that's always a wonderful problem to have. So I do want to thank everyone who wrote in saying they'd like to participate. But these are the ones that that we selected and tried to make sure that we had good representation from each community, and we're still a little heavy on the gender with females, but we do have 2 males that step forward. So this is the group that we, yeah. So this is the group that I'm presenting to you.
Okay. So I see teachers doesn't have anybody on there.
That other than Nancy Droulet, who is a teacher but will also be representing the association. We have done numerous shout outs, and so far we don't have any that have come forward.
Okay. If someone woke up tomorrow and had this desire, could we add them?
Yes, we could.
All right. So if any of you are watching, there's still time.
And our first meeting will be December 6th at 7:30.
Which are Wednesday mornings.
Right. And they'll be receiving an email probably tomorrow once you vote for this group.
Okay. Either way, if they submitted an application,
oh yes,
they'll find out one way or the other. Everybody will. Okay.
I have a question.
Hold on. We're going to do a motion in a second, and then we have a discussion.
Oh.
So if she wants to do the motion now, that's okay. So Kate makes the motion. Second. Valley. Questions?
Is there a way that the advisory committee could invite all those who submitted a letter of interest to, so that they can hear from everybody who's interested, just to gather some more general community feedback before they move into their specific deliberations?
So all of our committee meetings are open to anyone who wants to come and just sit in and listen in. So we will be sure to notify the people that were not chosen that they can do that. And then, of course, the group will be discussing ways that we can get input from multiple stakeholders as we go forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All those in favor? Opposed? No? Thank you. Okay. Consideration of action to appoint a vice chair for the RSU number 5 Board of Directors. We put Maddie there today, but she says she wants out already. We figured you'd come with no bad habits, right? I mean, your very first day, it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly me. So I don't know if we have any nominations. Oh, Naomi says we're not allowed to nominate her, by the way.
Did she really say that?
Yes. She's like, I don't want any more committees, and no to vice chair. She was afraid we were going to voluntold her.
I'd like to nominate Valley.
I would like to nominate Lindsay.
Okay. Any other nominations? Oh, Valley's got one.
Question.
Yes.
How much work is this?
I would say, and well, Beth's not here to answer, but I would say it's not heavy lifting.
Well, let's review what the position is.
Okay, so if I were not able to make a board meeting, or the chair were not able to make a board meeting, the vice chair would run the meeting. Beth always brings me a pen, because I usually forget. Thank you. See? You've got this down. I just always forget a pen, and she's always got spares. Generally, when we do, I want to say, when we do the leadership with the 3 towns, I'm trying to recall if Beth came to those in the past as the vice chair. I'm not sure if she did or not. But that sort of thing. So. Although Nelson told me this job wasn't a lot of work either, so. I remember that, Nelson. So, any other nominations? No? Anybody have any comments? Are you both open to being the vice chair?
I would like to say that I don't feel strongly either way, so if Lindsay really wants it, you can accept that nomination and take it. If you don't feel strongly either way, then that's fine too.
I mean, I'd be happy if Ellie did it. I have been actually wanting to beef up on my Robert's Rules of Order, and I think it would be good. It would be good practice if you were to ever not be able to be here.
Yeah, and if you ever see me breaking one of those rules, feel free to just, write me a little note.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm definitely open to it. Thank you for the nomination.
Okay. So, if you're both going to accept it, then we have to vote for one or the other. Are you both wanting to accept it, or are you... Did you... Very excited. I know.
I thought we were done with the elections and running against each other.
Yep.
I think I will bow out and Lindsay can take it.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second for Lindsay. And see, this is where we need our rules. Like, does somebody have to, can she just say she doesn't accept it? The nomination?
Right,
How do we take that motion and?
Oh, someone.
I think maybe if
Or
we just vote,
vote?
knowing her wishes, I guess.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
Okay. I just feel bad if we had none of us vote for her, even though she doesn't want us to.
I think you can withdraw the motion. Yeah.
So, Sarah?
I'd like to withdraw the nomination. Is that what I would say?
Your motion to
The
nominate
motion
Vali.
to nominate
And
Vali.
then John would withdraw his second. So we have one active motion on the floor. Do you have any speeches you'd like to make? No? Okay. That's right. What's your platform? Okay. So all those in favor of Lindsay as the vice chair? Opposed? Congratulations. You're like winning things all over the place this
Beyond
week.
my wildest dreams. I'm overcome.
So while this seems
really
strange, Ginny tells me this is how we do it. You guys have to switch seats right now.
Okay. Okay.
Bring a pen. It was nice sitting next to you for a little bit.
Naomi's gonna be so sad too.
That's right. We got to split our newbies. Okay. So consideration and approval of committee appointments. So all of these listed here were committees that Beth had previously been a member of, and we need to find new folks. And as I've sent out an email this afternoon, I don't think your email's set up yet, Maddie, but it is. Okay, wonderful. So I sent out an email this afternoon just for folks to be thinking about the two that really we need to fill pretty quickly are the two negotiations committees, professional negotiations and support negotiations, as it is a contract year, and we will begin bargaining this month for support, and teacher contracts will be not far behind. So while we'd love to fill all five, those are the two of priority. So hopefully folks have had some time to think and reflect on whether they think they they could take on those committees and bring something to the table. Jen.
Oh, it's been on the whole time. So, sorry if it said this in the email. I haven't checked my email yet today. Can you give just a little bit of a explanation of the time commitment on the negotiations? Or do you not want to scare people off?
Well, it depends. I think I have only been involved in one set of negotiations while I've been on the board. And from my understanding, and maybe the principals have a better, he's shaking his head. You've been here longer than any of us, so. This last one wasn't overly hard. From my understanding, it was once a week, I think. Maybe not even, maybe once every other week. And we were done in the spring. So we started in, say, January, I think, and we were done before school got out. The time before that was a lot more labor intensive. That was sort of the amalgamation of 3 different contracts from all the different districts, and that one took forever.
Okay.
So it was over a year, yeah. So, I'm hopeful that it will be on the shorter end as opposed to the longer end. I think support staff typically has been quicker than the professional contract.
But is it like a specific meeting date every,
Okay.
Here's our first meeting.
So
Yes.
for support
Right. We don't have-
is right now the first tentative meeting between for support staff is the 28th of November at 4:30 in the afternoon at the central office. I think if we have no one that can do that date, we can adjust that date, but ideally that's when the other committee is all ready to go and Dr. Foley is ready to go. And we don't have any dates or times set up for the other ones. I mean, typically we try to make it, last time we did it at sort of end of day into early evening because obviously they're teaching and other people are working. So we try to make it so it works with people's schedules. But.
Are you asking for?
Yeah, I'm looking for volunteers.
Well, now that I'm sitting in Beth's seat,
So
I had this thing come over me. I just had this thing come over me. Like, wasn't she on the professional negotiations?
She was on all of these.
Oh my gosh! Well,
were
I don't know if
all
I can
her.
do that. But I've really I've wanted to participate in the professional negotiations. I just feel like that would help complete my picture of
Okay.
the district.
Anyone else interested in that one? Okay. So we will put Ms. Sterling in that one. As it says on here, Beth was actually on both. It's not, I don't think most people usually do both. She happened to be on both, but is anyone else interested in the support negotiations?
I'll do that. With
Okay.
Candy, are you the other one?
That's right, you've been doing that for a couple of rounds, right?
Yeah.
So she can give you some
Great.
insight. Thank you. Those are the ones I was really hoping to make sure we got filled. The other 3 that are on here are the Stipend Review Committee, the Freeport Performing Arts Center Advisory Committee, and then the RSU 5 Community Programs Advisory Committee. Did she give us a list of when stuff meets? There it is. Was it in the package for everybody, or is it just that one?
No, I just had her update that. The Stipend Review Committee has already met a couple of times this year. Jen can speak to that. I think we might have one other meeting scheduled, and I think that would probably be it for this year, maybe 2. And then both of those other committees, they have not been scheduled, but David Watts is planning on pulling that committee, each of those committees together twice this year.
Yeah, according to this, they both meet twice a year. Maddie?
I would be interested in both the Stipend Committee and the Performing Arts Committee.
Okay.
And I will do the community programs unless somebody else wants to do it. Did anyone else want the community programs?
Actually, I'd be interested in that one.
So Maddie's the only one interested in stipend and FPAC, and then we've got a runoff on the community programs. Is that what we're talking about? Is that fair? Okay. Okay. And just to remind folks that we redo committees every year in June, so this is just from now until June where you can re-up or bow out. Okay, so community programs advisory, who do we got? So Jeremy was interested, Kate was interested in Valley?
I withdraw mine.
I withdraw mine too.
All right, so Mr. Clough it is.
Thank you, Valerie.
Okay, so professional negotiations, Lindsay Sterling. Support negotiations, Jen Galetta. Stipend Review Committee, Maddie Vertenten. FPAC Advisory Committee, Maddie Vertenten. And RSU 5 Community Action Advisory, Jeremy Clough. Correct? So do we have a motion for the slate of committees? Kate and Valley, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you. That wasn't too painful. Nice work, guys. Okay, so now we are on to the workshop. So we're still keeping guidance first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, these two things. Okay, go back then. Everything else is yours to keep.
I think so, because it'll be better. I think the lights are like one set. That's better. There. Now I can see it's red. You know how to see them around. Are we ready to go? We good to go? I'll just wait till he sits down. Good evening. My name's Dana Clark. This is Liz Pierce. We are two of the 3 school counselors here at Freeport High School. Alexis Rogg unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. We're actually here to present to you multiple pathways toward a career in entomology. So hang on to your hats. It's going to be a fabulous conversation. Actually, my son really does want to be an entomologist. He's 5, but he likes stink bugs, not grubs. So we're going to give you an overview of what we do in the guidance department here at the high school. And the American School Counselor Association, ASCA, suggests that for a school counseling program to be successful, they should have 3 domains. One being career and post-secondary, personal, social, and then academic.
Okay, so we will start with the academic domain. I think that a lot of people, that's what they think of when they think of schools first. And what we talk a lot about at Freeport High School is sort of our funnel approach. And in our guidance department, we do actually work on some sort of school-wide initiatives as well as working with individual students. So starting with sort of one of the big things that we do typically in the spring is develop the master schedule, and that is something that the guidance department spends many hours. We enter everything into PowerSchool, but it's really creating the schedule is something that, it does take time and a lot of sort of thoughtfulness about what the students need and what's good for kids, as well as the teachers and everybody in the community. We do, with the scheduling, also schedule all the students. We meet with a lot of our students to help them develop their schedules, and you'll see a little bit later, we work with them on 4-year plans. We do create all the sections for teachers. We do their independent studies. We've I think you all got our sheet, so I don't want to read every line. As we go in, though, that also includes doing the program of studies. So last year, I think a lot of you who were here saw that we revamped the entire program of studies to make it a little bit more user-friendly and to explain what we do academically for students in the school. So that's sort of the big picture, top of the funnel. sort of working down individual students. This is what we love to do probably the most. We meet with students one-on-one. We try to meet with every student at least once a year. Some students we meet with 5 times a day. It sort of depends on the student. But we do meet with students one-on-one. We talk about their 4-year plan. And we do that at different times of the year depending on the grade level. We're kind of gearing up to meet with all of our 9th graders soon one-on-one and start that 4-year plan where we can talk about, well, what is your 4 years going to look like, but then also connecting it to post-secondary. We work with students for personalized learning plans. We go to IEP meetings, we go to 504, we actually run the 504 meetings. And then we do a lot of other stuff with students. Grade checks, we're coming up, that's the end of the first quarter. We'll actually go through and we find students who might be struggling and we bring them in to meet with them. We kind of, that's our thing, is meeting with students for academic support, credit recovery, and kind of just intervening and really supporting them when they need it. On top of that, we do all of the registrations for them. And one of the big things we do is the 8th grade transition. So starting in January, we go and we meet with all of, we have 8th grade parent night. We go and we have the students come here. We go all out to the middle school and to Durham. We meet with the students there, and then we go back and we register them for their classes. So we really try to coordinate that transition for them as well. So that's some of the academic stuff. Then a big piece, which Dana's going to talk about, is the assessment piece.
So that's my realm. I do most of the coordinating for our assessments we do here at the high school. So our 10th graders, except for NWEA, I do not oversee that one. That is not in the guidance department. But anything that's related to the College Board. So PSAT testing, we did this year, all 10th graders, our district took care of all of them and had all of them take the assessment, which was fantastic. And then it was optional for 11th grade students. So total, we had about 210 students that took the PSAT this past fall. Those results will be coming in December. The state of Maine now uses the SAT as their assessment for all juniors, at least for the evidence-based reading and writing and math portions. And then separate from that, they do the MEA science testing. And so that will be all of our 11th grade students. And I believe that's April 11th this year. We also offer Freeport High School as a site for SAT testing on additional Saturdays. So sometimes when students are taking those independently, they can choose Freeport High School as long as the College Board allows us to be open for that. Sometimes our numbers have been a little bit lower, so the College Board has chosen not to keep us open because they have their reasons. And then AP exam testing is the big one in May. I do all the coordinating of who's going to proctor those exams and then finding a location to test those students and then making sure they're all there, getting everything in and back, and just payment, a variety of different things. And then on top of that, once in a while I also assist our administration with some of the data reporting because it all comes through the College Board, and since I'm the point person for the College Board, a lot of that data actually kind of funnels through me and onto them. And then beyond that, it's like all that, and there's more. Region 10. So our students, so many of our students access Region 10, and Liz is our liaison with Region 10. And we have Region 10 actually come, I believe they usually come at the end of January, beginning of February, to share all of our programs, mostly with our 10th grade students, since oftentimes students start Region 10 in their junior year. And then we also attend all of the student quarter celebrations each quarter. They're fantastic. We love going to this. And then beyond that, we try to find other ways to enrich the learning for our students. If there's not a course that we're offering here, but there's an interest area, sometimes we can access courses through virtual high school. We also have used BYU's high school program to access online learning opportunities. And then AP for All is a newer opportunity for students to take AP courses that we're not able to offer here, and that is an online correspondence program that's now offered through UMFK, and it's free. So, social emotional. So I think that these slides are actually probably the shortest in terms of how much information is on them, but I think a huge part of what we do is supporting our students socially and emotionally. So often our students have barriers in their day, challenges in their day that prevent them from accessing their education or moving on to that post-secondary piece. So we see students, as Liz said, daily sometimes multiple times in a day. But beyond that, we also meet as a team with our administrators, our school nurse, our social worker, so that we can do kind of what the pulse of the school is once a week to be sure that we're catching all of those kind of high flyers. And then we also provide referrals sometimes if a student's needs are beyond what we can triage, because that's what I often say to people, we're triage. We can put the Band-Aid on for now, but sometimes things are just a lot bigger than what we can do. So then we may refer out to outside support. And then sometimes if a student's having a conflict with another student, if they feel like they are not sure how to approach a teacher, we oftentimes will also set up meetings for that student to be that support person with them to coach them through having some of those difficult conversations. And then beyond that, I feel like I'm saying that a lot, we all participate in Challenge Day, which is coming up next week. And that's for all of the 9th grade students. This is the 3rd year that we will be participating in Challenge Day. And it's a great opportunity for our 9th graders to kind of break down some of those walls, go beneath the surface, and just be real with one another and understand that we all have our own things going on. And you don't always know what's going on with the other people around you. We help Seeds of Independence. We help find the students to be part of the Seeds of Independence group, which is a mentoring group. They're fantastic. They're an outside group that comes into us but does mentoring with our 9th grade students and uses juniors and seniors to facilitate those meetings. And then a couple of us are actually advisors to different clubs here at the school. I'm co-advisor of the Interact Club, and Liz is one of the co-advisors for the Civil Rights team. And then we also attend Natural Helpers Training, which is a new program that's getting up and running through our social work department.
Okay, on to post-secondary planning, the third part of sort of the big picture of what we do. So one of the big things I know you all are possibly aware is that we did update the school profile. I did bring copies for everybody to see this year, but that was something that we did this year as part of that college application process and what schools see and when people come into our community as well. So post-secondary planning includes college. We do a lot of the college planning with students. We also do career planning with students, so I'll go over a little bit of the nitty-gritty without getting too detailed. But we meet with students as whole groups to start the college process in 11th grade. But even before that, I think I mentioned when we talk about the 4-year plan, even with 9th graders, we're talking about, well, what is it, that you're thinking? And they don't often know, but it's sort of to start that conversation. We have a program called Naviance that we've been using to help students, take some assessments, figure out maybe what their strengths are, what their learning style is. And then there are ways that, what their personality is, and then how to connect that to a future career where they might be happy. So we do all of that. But in terms of the college planning, we're sort of in the thick of it right now. We work with students, and some students need us a lot, and they come meet with us a lot. And some students are like, I got this. Maybe they have a couple of older siblings, and they already know where they want to apply. But we do everything from helping students with really specific timelines, sitting with them, doing the Common App, to, it's very individualized is what we can offer them. We meet with all of the juniors starting in the spring, one-on-one, to really get the process kind of moving along so they can go visit schools over the summer. And then in the senior, we meet with seniors, as I said, it's, they can set appointments as much as they need to have us. We write all the letters of recommendation, so we really do a lot for that. We also help them with the scholarship process in the spring. So again, we manage all of those local scholarships. We help students seek outside scholarships as well. We run the candlelight ceremony, so it's kind of like, it kind of keeps going and going. And again, I mentioned earlier the Naviance, which is this great platform that we've been using. And so some students, I really use it just for career searching, because some students do go directly into the workforce. And one student who came in today, he's like, I have no idea what I want to do. And I said, well, come back. We're going to get you on the Naviance program, and we're going to start searching and kind of give you some ideas. And you don't have to know exactly. I've changed careers like 5 times. But, it's like you don't, but when you leave, you got to have a good plan. So we talk about that. So again, I mentioned the career planning. We do have some resume building stuff on Naviance. And again, it's very individualized, so it's hard to sort of pinpoint because we really see each student as an individual here, so it kind of depends on what they need. So that is that. For post-secondary, we do offer a lot of evening programs. Some of you maybe have been to some of them. In the fall, we offer 3. We do the Senior Parent Night, the FAFSA Financial Aid Night, which is presented by FAME, and then actually next week we have a Gap Year Enrichment Night program, which is pretty neat. And then in the spring, we do another financial aid night and the Junior Parent College Night. And then finally, some things that we've sort of added on recently are some college field trips to get students out onto campuses to college fairs. So last year we went to USM with all the 10th graders. We brought all the 11th graders to a college fair. And then this spring we have a similar plan. We're going to actually expand, bring students to UNE, USM, UMF, and then we're going to do a trip to the NEACAC College Fair up at University of Maine, Augusta, where there'll be 120 colleges, I think. The other thing we do is the Early College for Maine coordination, which is a program with SMCC that helps give additional support to students starting in their junior year to transition to college. And those students are eligible for scholarships when they're in that program. So we coordinate that. And I think we're back to you.
We're back to me.
Yeah.
I know, we're almost done. So, just other ongoing responsibilities are, we update our website, obviously, and we send out newsletters periodically. We receive a lot of email communication and phone calls, and we do our best to get back to families and students as quickly as possible. But we also have drop-ins. Sometimes people pop in, they may be in the area, or even somebody who might be in the area considering a new high school will come by and maybe want a tour or something along those lines. You never know what may come up in any given day. But we also have communication with our administration. We meet with our principal once a week, but we also meet as a team beyond that once a week as well with our administrative support, our registrar and our secretary. They are absolutely, we could not function without them. They're wonderful. And then just in general with teachers come in for consultations. We go and speak with teachers as well. Again, on ongoing email communication, all that good stuff. So just to sum it all up, a day in the life of a Freeport High School counselor looks different every single day. And although we would love to say that it's all balanced in those 3 domains, it's rare that actually happens. There is always a curveball. There is always something that kind of upsets the apple cart. But overall, our students come first always. And so if there's a student need in front of us, sometimes the schedule change or the college conversation may have to wait, and we take care of our kids right then and there. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I'm going to start by saying thank you. I've been a consumer of most of that, and including getting a tour from you before we moved here. And it sounds like it's even become more robust since my son graduated a couple years ago. So I have a bunch. Let's see. I've been one of the volunteers for Challenge Day, and I wasn't aware what the follow-up was that you do in the school, and I've heard mixed reviews about how well that continues, and I know that that's always the hope, is how do we maintain that culture of what happens on that important day so that it hopefully has an impact on the culture of the school. So I'd love to know just a little bit more about what that follow-up presentation is, and are you seeing any shifts in the culture because of that?
So last year, actually, we did a follow-up lesson. We was it a week later or 2 weeks later? It was shortly after. And we actually had something different planned. We had a Naviance lesson planned, and we decided that would be a really great opportunity, since we were going to be seeing the 9th graders naturally, that we should do kind of a follow-up and see where they were at. And we could actually didn't we have them get back into their family groups? Or if it wasn't, they were close. Actually, we did by advisory, and we kind of called them their new family groups, building off of some of the terminology that they use in Challenge Day. And I think at that point, maybe it was a little too soon. They were still feeling pretty emotional from the experience itself. And so it was kind of like, oh my gosh, here we go again. Because I think they were still, so looking back on it, we kind of processed that maybe we could have done that a little bit later. But just in general, after Challenge Day, we do go through the list of students. Anybody that is identified as maybe needing a little additional support is their names are given to the guidance counselors, and we do follow up with them right then and there. And in general, the feedback from the students I've spoken to is they really appreciated having the opportunity. And my current seniors who didn't get to do Challenge Day, they're the only class right now in the building that will not have had that opportunity. They're mad. They're bummed. They wish that they could have had that. And so I think overall it has been a positive experience.
And I just wanted to add, because last year I think seeing ninth graders, they don't come in as much as the upperclassmen come in to see us. And pretty much the day after Challenge Day, I felt like ninth graders were coming in all the time. And so there was that shift in where they felt more comfortable. At least that was my perception, talking to adults in the school, coming and talking to us, and it felt very different to me. And that's when I feel like I got to know my ninth graders. So I saw it as a huge positive in that way.
Thank you. A question about the master schedule and the course planning. Do we consistently offer the same AP classes every year? And is that, do you guys help determine what that is?
So our administrator, ultimately it's a decision. The department and the principal and vice principal, they have those conversations about what course offerings we'll be doing year to year. We definitely get feedback from the students about what they're looking for. If this year we had a huge pocket of kids that were wanting to take AP US History, and they were going to have to access that online. And so we found a way that we could have a teacher teach that class right here in the building.
Thank you. I just have a couple more. I haven't seen this firsthand, but I've heard some concerns about the cover sheet that is representative of Freeport High School that goes out to colleges. Do we have a new one?
We have a new one.
Yes. Good news.
New and improved.
That was not a plant, by the way. I didn't. Thank you. That's great. I'll move on to my other questions. I'm excited about that. That's great. Just two more. I don't think I heard you mention semester away opportunities or exchange student opportunities. Do you work with students about that as well?
We do. And actually on Tuesday, we're doing our enrichment night. So one thing that I've always appreciated about Freeport High School is that we've always been flexible with our students and encouraged them to go and do things beyond our walls. We currently have a student at the Island School. We currently have a student, we have 2 students on city term in New York City right now. I think that's it for Kids Abroad right now. And then we have more that are going in the spring semester too. So again, we've always supported them with those. I kind of am that point person. Next week, for our enrichment fair, we have 20 confirmed groups coming and the majority offer semester, summer, and gap year opportunities. So we're pretty excited about that. Does that answer your question?
And my last question is about the workload in the guidance office. There are just 3 of you, correct? Do you have administrative support? You do. Who's your full-time administrative support in your office?
So we have 2 that together make up a full. So Kim Calnan is our registrar. I would call her our registrar because she does most of those duties. And then Sue Allen also spends half of her day with us. So they kind of split the day and they overlap for a couple of hours each day.
And this might be more a question for Ms. Galco or Dr. Foley, but I'm just wondering if the numbers are comparable in terms of the population, 3 full-time guidance counselors. Is it comparable from school to school? Do we have the kind of staffing that we need to take care of our students?
You mean compared to other districts?
Yeah.
So in terms of student load, the ASCA number is 250 per counselor, and right now we're at like 180 to 190 to each person. So I think that counselor-wise, I can't speak to administrative support, but counselor-wise, we're definitely
That's great.
fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have some questions too. First one is, how would you characterize the percentage of your time that goes through each of those 3 domains?
So I think we've kind of tossed this around a lot. It's like, how much really do we do? Because we have so many students, we do keep track of it. We have calendars where we have, individual students scheduled, but we also have so many students who stop by, and there are things that then just don't automatically go into the calendar. So it's hard to definitively say. But when we looked at our annual calendar and our individual weekly calendars, it does seem pretty evenly split between a third. It depends on the time of year. Some times of year, like when we're working on the master schedule, it's pretty focused on that. It's in that academic realm in the sense that it's, supporting, but it's not direct contact with students. So we're much more focused in that. In the fall, when we're working with our seniors, it's really college focused, but we also see the college stuff throughout the year then with our juniors and meeting with other, 9th and 10th graders as well. So we feel really that it's pretty evenly balanced between the 3.
Mm-hmm. So is that the norm for most schools, or do other schools have more staffing for college prep stuff? Because I'm hearing a lot of feedback that people would really benefit and would like to see more support in the college prep and application end of the spectrum, and starting early on so that the kids get to talk about, college and post-secondary plans early on, and then they get to know you as counselors, and they establish that relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that is a process that is followed through one-on-one every year, so that it builds on some early seeds in 9th grade.
Well, and I do think that the school, and this is in talking with other counselors at other schools and getting their perspective, and of course not having been necessarily in those schools, it's difficult to say with any sort of definitive sort of amount, but I think that's like our movement is to really keep bringing it back to like working with the 9th graders, 10th graders, and building it on there. The sheet that we all sent you, it does give towards the back an overview of what we do each year to support that post-secondary planning process. And I think that what we're able to do, which I've seen, and when we've talked to people at other schools that might just have one college counselor for 150 students, is what they say is that person, they don't even usually get those kids until senior year, and then they don't really have a relationship with them. And so and they have 150 letters to write. I met one of them at a recent college breakfast, and I said, well, how do you even do that? Because I have 35 seniors this year, and I think it's awesome. I've met with Carter how many times this year? And it's been, and it's amazing because we have over the last, this is only my 2nd year, but I feel like I've really gotten to know my current seniors really well over that year, because I think Freeport is a pretty small district, and the way that our office is set up, and because we split it up, we are able to do that. So my juniors coming in for next year now, I will have had them for 2 years. You've had them since their freshman year. And so it's really the relationships that have been built here. I do think that the students have that. And if they want more support, if that's the feedback, that's great feedback for us. And then what can we do starting in freshman year that might be more college specific?
Yeah.
And I think we could do that.
Yeah, it may be that those students end up going to college. It may be that they just go straight to work. But just building their aspirations from early on is really important. And I don't know how much time you have to actually get to know each student and basically give them a window into what they could do and what they could aspire to, and just demonstrate that you guys believe in them, so that it's not so much the one-on-one in the 9th grade and the one-on-one in junior year, and then it's at the discretion of the student to come to you.
Well, and we also do, because we have an advisory program, we're also able to go out and see kids in advisories as well. So we do have some smaller group work that we have actually at the end of the month, where we're going to be doing some smaller advisory groups. So there are opportunities where students can get to know us in that way. And I think because even with 180 students on your caseload, that's still a lot of students. And so it is kind of refining those ways to see them. And that is part of where I think we're hoping the advisory program will go, so we have more opportunities to see them in those kind of smaller groups, and then one-on-one as well.
That would be great, because I get great feedback from students who are motivated and who are self-starters and who make the appointments and come to the guidance office. But those same students speak of other friends of theirs who don't do that, and they're not required to come and see you, and they're not required to file things on time and meet all the deadlines. And so for the kids who are not quite as put together and go-getters,
Yeah, and
it
we're
would
pretty
be
good at
helpful to
finding them
have.
too. So they, we go out. I will say, kids, we kind of show up to their study hall and we're like, hey, why don't you come? And so I do think the ones, we have students who are first generation students, and I literally have to go find them and say, okay, today we're going to sit on the Common App together. And that's what we do because I know they don't have that support. And I think that because of the way our caseloads are, we are able to actually go get those students, and we do it. And I think that's because we're all pretty passionate about it. And so I think it's one of those things. I think it's there's always that challenge, but I think the way it's set up is really working well.
And do you have time to go out of the school building and visit colleges to establish relationships with admissions in colleges so they know about Freeport High and who we are and what caliber of students we produce?
Yes, actually. I'm actually going to North Carolina to check out schools at the end of November because High Point University, we've been sending a lot of students there, and I had a great conversation with their rep, and she's like, you need to come to campus. You need to see what we're all about. So when I set up the travel, they said, are you going to see any other colleges while you're here? And I said, well, actually, yeah, I'd love to see as many as I can. I don't get to North Carolina very often. So the rep there actually set me up so I can go visit 4 other schools while I'm there. Our program reps, they come here all the time, and they give us those opportunities. They're emailing us with counselor breakfasts. Liz is going to be going to UNH to see the campus, to talk with the people there. St. A's actually was just here. St. Anselm was here today. And I said, I've got all these students that are applying there. You have to read their applications. So we do. We have great opportunity, and we take full advantage whenever we can. We don't like to be out of the office too often, but if an opportunity arises, absolutely, we will jump right on it and go to as many campuses as we can.
Okay. I have one last question. Do you ever survey parents and students to see what it is that they would like to see more of, or what it is that they think you're doing really well, what they think would be really helpful to them?
Yeah,
so that you can build your program based on need that is expressed by parents and students, obviously. Students have great feedback too.
So we did a student survey last year with our 9th graders, and then actually our intern is actually working on one for our seniors right now. But that's actually something we've talked a lot about, is doing almost a needs assessment or just surveying our families. So it's something that's in development.
Okay.
I just have a comment. I read through this, and I have to find out where your extra hours come in the day, because that's and I can attest to the fact that having a child go through the school and have one here and one coming, that I really feel like all this gets done, and it's really amazing that it happens with the 3 of you. So I just think that's a testament to the commitment, and it's appreciated.
Thank you.
I only have a few questions. I think that I heard this right. Did you say you write letters of recommendations for all of your students?
Yes, and they're not form letters.
Okay,
they're individualized.
So that really surprises me, because when I was applying to college, I had to go around and ask teachers that knew me really well to write a letter of recommendation. So for a guidance counselor to be writing letter of recommendations for their students, that's impressive. Okay, that's more of a comment, not a question. I guess the first part was a question because I wasn't sure I heard right. The other part, the other question I had to do with recruiting to the high school. Is that anything that falls under the guidance department, or is that a different, not in your realm? Because one of the things over the years that we've talked about is retaining students from middle school to high school, and so that's one of my questions. And then the other one has to do with Region 10 and placement there. I'm the board representative with John for Region 10, and one of the things that has been expressed at our meetings there has been kind of there is this perception that there's a bottleneck with the guidance departments in all of the sending schools, with how Region 10 is perceived by students. And so I just would like to know more about how you promote Region 10 to our students.
Sure. So now I got to go back to your first question, which I've already kind of forgotten what it is, because now I'm on to Region 10. So I can address that one first. So Region 10, I would say, okay, going back to recruiting. We're not active recruiters, like we're not out marketing the school with obviously like flyers or whatever. We did do the school profile. We are in charge at our school of any sort of prospective students and families who come in. So typically, and I actually have taken that over, so the parents will come in often, they meet with me, I set up a shadow for their student to go around with one of our awesome students here, and they kind of follow them depending on what grade it is. And then we do follow up and we find out how it went. And what I've found, our enrollment seems to be going up. We definitely are getting students who are coming back from schools where they're kind of going out and then they're saying, oh, we want to come back to Freeport. So that's what I'm hearing from parents who come in terms of sort of the prospective parents, but we don't actively go recruit them out in the community. I don't know if that was your question.
That is exactly what I was asking, because as a community member, I receive flyers, and my kids aren't even close to high school yet, for them to go to other high schools, not Freeport High School. And so, yes, to Chevrolet and what was the other one? There was another one. I think it was
to some of the private schools.
I think it was
girls.
Yes, it's private schools, and the other one was up in the science school up in Limestone. And so I see that as they're trying to work their way in and compete with our high school. And so I'm just wondering if there's something more proactive that we should be doing to reach those students long before we are doing it now.
Because that's in 8th grade. I was going to say we do start meeting with them sort of mid-year in the 8th grade. And, I think we do a pretty good job when we meet with them, and we're fun, and then we have them come to school and we do this whole tour, and the kids seem to love it who come to visit. But what I'm hearing is that maybe that might be too late. So that's something we can look into.
I do know that the power outage last week was a big hit with the Powell Elementary School students. That day at the high school was a huge impression left on my kids. My son said to me, I want to go to Freeport High School. And I was like, you're going to Freeport High School.
Selling it to the kids, right? Because that, the recruitment you're getting is not targeted at your kids for Chevrolet and these private schools, it's for the parents.
Right.
So how do we not only reach the kids so that they say they want to go to Freeport High School, but make sure that the parents are feeling that same love?
Yeah, and I think, as I said, some of the parents who have been coming, whose students have gone elsewhere, who are now thinking they want to come back, I think Freeport seems to be sort of building in its reputation, so to speak, and the parents seem much more sort of interested. It is interesting, the parents who are coming in and saying, well, actually now my student really wants to come here and I want them to come here, and they kind of get excited when they walk around the school. So that's at least the perception. But we can talk about earlier than 8th grade. I don't know if that's really for us or if that's someone else, but we can do that. And then as to Region 10, I think from our point of view, I love Region 10. And so I tell kids, if I do hear, a rumor about, well, what is Region 10 and what that might be, I think we all really respect what they do up there. Their programs are really robust. We've all been up there and toured the programs and been really involved. And so that's why we have when Region 10 comes to give the presentations, they do give them to all of the 10th grade students. So everybody has an opportunity to see what it is. I believe in 8th grade is when all the students actually go visit Region 10. So, students kind of over different periods of time when they are in Freeport do get to sort of experience Region 10 to some degree. And I think that we kind of offer it up to any student. And it really sort of depends on what their interest is. Most of the time students do say, oh, I'm definitely going to Region 10. Or sometimes if students are just unsure what they want to do, or they express, oh my gosh, I really love, I want to get a job in a kitchen or whatever. And it's like, well, go do food trades at Region 10. And I think that we do offer that up as part of the 4-year plan when we start talking to them as freshmen. So I think we're all positive about it. And you know, I think that there are some students will say, my parents won't let me go because my parents have feelings about Region 10. And so, but I kind of feel like that's slowly dissipating a little bit. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I had not ever thought of the fact that parents could be discouraging it too, and so that's something I think we could maybe talk about at one of our meetings with Region 10. But I have one last question, statement. I'm a UMaine grad. Why wasn't UMaine listed as a campus tour?
Oh, you want to? Yeah, you do that.
It's US, those.
No, UMaine.
Well, it's 2 hours away.
Orono.
It's 2+ hours away, and we have to coordinate with the bus schedules here at in RSU 5. And right, so, but that's why. It's just because it's 2 hours away. It's not off the table.
UMF is barely squeaking in the
Yeah.
So I just was curious what the feedback has been this year with the new proficiency-based curriculum for the 9th graders. Have you seen sort of an influx in questions and concerns from kids or parents, or, you know, is there concern about how to lay out these 4-year plans when we're not exactly sure what this looks like 4 years from now?
In general, well, I think that our 9th grade students are at least used to the grading already because they had it in middle school, so it's not foreign to them completely. Where I think when we tried it a few years back, it was a little different. So they're at least used to that. There are still some questions. Today was the honor roll question, like how do I get on the honor roll? But I think most of those questions have been fielded to Jen and Charlie, really, and so they could probably speak more to that. I mean, we do definitely get some questions from kids, but ultimately most of the parent questions end up going there. And in general, you know, we're doing our 4-year plans based on what we know right now, and we always I write everything in pencil for a reason because everything's going to change always, and I always say that to kids too. So there are some kids that are able to map out 4 years, and there are some kids that need to map out 4 days. So we meet them where they're at, and that's where we go from there. Profile.
And it still has grades in there, and 93 to 100. I thought we were not 10 grade.
So this is for the 12, so our current 12th graders.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. We are sending this to their colleges, so it has to go with what their program was.
Okay, so over the next,
It will,
so in 3 years, this section has to be.
yes,
Yep.
very much.
Yep.
I've been getting some feedback from students who wanted to get challenging courses, and then they weren't able to get into them and ended up taking courses that they felt were too easy. What is the process for a student in that situation? And should that have, you know, it strikes me as like that shouldn't have been the outcome, but perhaps that does happen from time to time. Can you just talk about that situation with the schedule? I know it's a logistical, huge challenge. So I guess what I'm wondering is how much room for improvement is there, and what are our plans for improving that?
Well, there's always room for improvement because it's never going to be perfect. But so our process is that students give us their requests in March, April time. And then based on those requests, we determine how many sections of every class we're going to need. So it's pretty early that they're having to make that decision, what class am I going to be taking? And then based on that, once we know how many sections, if we have teachers to teach the class, then we try to make the best fit puzzle. And so we create the puzzle and we use Power School to throw all the kids in. And we try 1,001 different ways to get everybody into, particularly those students who are going to be taking those more rigorous courses, because traditionally there's only one section of those or 2 sections of that. So that kind of plays into it too. If you're asking for a lot of singleton classes, at some point there could be a conflict, and that's usually what happens. And I think that this year, in some of the feedback I've received from some students, they changed their mind. at some point along the way, which is fine. It happens. They're kids. We all do it. But we'd already made that best fit puzzle. And when they changed their mind, then there were conflicts. And that's usually what happens. There are conflicts, or class sizes became too big, and we physically couldn't put 26 kids in a classroom where there were only 22 chairs. So when that happens, we try to find an alternative for them. And it's not always the best, but that's when we use programs. If it's an AP class, we use AP for All or VHS. And sometimes that will allow the student to still be able to take a class that has that high level of rigor. And other times it means they have to make a choice. They have to pick. Maybe they have to choose between honors chamber choir and concert, well, not concert band, we would never put those two together, but you may have to make a tough choice. Maybe you can't take AP physics and AP bio because maybe they're offered at the same time, or their lab is, or something like that. But that's kind of the process. And we get to like 95%. And everyone's really pretty good. It's usually just a couple of students that have that particular experience.
And those, like, say this is happening to a student, does that student know that they are to come to you with their concerns? Like, it does seem like there's a wide range of usage of the guidance department. And like Molly was saying, you know, there are the students who are, they're going to be knocking on the door at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. And then, you know, there are other students who may not know that they should come in that situation. Or do you feel like they all know and everybody's coming in who needs it?
The majority in this scenario, the majority are banging on your door because they're not happy. Because particularly those high achieving students, they want their high achieving classes. It totally makes sense. But when we make those best fit puzzles, we actually see the student names. It's not just numbers. We know exactly who we're talking about. And so we'll actually seek out some of those students sometimes. If we know that this student is only going to get 4 out of their 5, then we'll actually call them in and we'll let them know what the scenario is. Not every time, but we try our best so that they're not stuck in that situation where they wouldn't necessarily be faced with, I don't know what to do with my courses. We also, on the back of the registration form, we write every direction. So they write on one side, but all the instructions are on the back. We email blast them over and over and over again. We go into advisories, particularly for 9th and 10th grade students, because our upperclassmen tend to have already done it before, but we'll go into advisories. We'll just remind them who we are, how we operate, if we're by the alphabet, like who your counselor is, and encourage them to come in. But there will still be a kid that might not come through the door. But I do think that we try really hard to reach as many kids as we can. We also have an add drop period. So add drop is at the beginning of the year. It's the first 2 weeks after the semester starts, and students can come in and make those changes. Sometimes though, I will say that's a little too late because, again, we've already made that best fit puzzle, but students can make those adjustments up to 2 weeks after each semester starts.
And we do an ad drop in the spring as well, after we put out the schedule. So, and we have like sign-up sheets outside our doors and in the hallways, and so I do think most students probably are aware of that to some degree.
As a follow-up to that, I'm just wondering, because I know that our policy committee is taking a look at potential class size policy. How would a class size policy in the high school impact that process that you just outlined for us?
That's a great question for Jen. That would be administrative. Yeah.
So I'm fairly certain that Charlie Mellon talked about this at the board meeting 2 weeks ago, which was basically that our schedule is an incredibly complex beast, in that one singleton class then affects, singleton meaning there's only one section, there's no other section of that class that's offered, then it's like a Jenga puzzle of how that fits together. And so what ends up happening is that sometimes if we had 2 sections of a class, one might end up with 25 students in it and the other with 16, because the kids in the 25 cannot possibly fit that other section. So our schedule, I don't even know how we would be able to make the schedule if we were sticking tight to a number of a classroom that we would have to max out and close the class. And then the question becomes, who gets in? Is it going to be like college? It's a 10 a.m. registration time and you're on your computer. I would hate to see that happen. And so I think we have, in the high schools that I've worked in, incredibly reasonable numbers in the high school. But I think that a limit of class size would actually limit the classes that we would offer.
So I'm sorry to go back to the college prep. This is what I hear most about. I never hear any comments about the social emotional support, the academic planning. People seem to be really happy with all the work that you're doing. However, I have heard that people would like to have more support during the application process for all the kids who are applying to college. And so my question is, given that we invest so much time, resources, and effort, 9 through 11, to get these kids into the best possible college or jobs, that last year is so crucial. And it would be great to give those students as much support as they need, and they need a lot of support because it's a lot of very difficult decisions, and not everyone has parents who are totally dedicated, following every step and every deadline and every application, essay, and everything else that goes along with that process. So there are some schools that you probably are aware of that have a senior seminar that is devoted exclusively to college application preparation, so that the kids are required to go. They get credit for the class, but they're all required to go either if they're doing college prep or a career prep, and they have to devote X amount of time every week during the school day, and they're followed through with staff. So is that something that has ever been considered at Freeport High, so that students don't have to do this all outside of school in addition to all the classes that they're already taking, so they're already stressed out and maxed out, and also so that adults in the building have the ability to follow through with every student, not just the ones who are knocking on your door, but the ones who are hiding under the chair too?
So a couple years ago, actually, Rich Robinson actually did like a senior lab, and because he was an English teacher who had an extra time available in his schedule, and that's what he did. He was available to work with students on their essays and on their college applications, and he kind of worked in conjunction with us. I think what would be tough to make it, if you made it a mandatory class, is those kids that you're talking about that have that crazy schedule. They literally don't have time in their schedule to add that in. But we've talked about maybe trying to do a class. We've also offered, during advisory, we've offered Common App workshops that are for anybody to come, and we can call back kids as well. A lot of us, that's what we do. We sit down with kids and we actually fill out their application with them. And I did that with high achieving students, and I've done that with the kids that have zero support too. So we really run the spectrum with that. It's a possibility. It's just a matter of finding where it could fit in the schedule. It comes back to that again, right? But it is something that we've done and had success with. But I'm not sure about making it a mandatory thing, what the feedback would be if it was mandatory.
Do you think there would be enough people signing up if it were elective? I mean, there are a lot of kids who are applying to college and looking for
it would
careers.
Be elective. If it was an elective class, we tried an SAT prep class once, and we had 2 kids sign up for it. So you'd be like, it's awesome. Like, I would love to do that. I would love to teach that class. You were a classroom teacher. Alexis was a classroom teacher. So, I mean, we're game for it. But the kids, there is so much else that they are trying to pack into their time. We do have a senior seminar class, but it's kind of more like in general what you do outside of school, not necessarily just focused on college. But we are offering those workshops during advisory times. So we're kind of trying to pilot it a little bit to see what the response would be.
I was going to comment on the senior seminar class that Lisa Blyer was teaching last year, I think. I was one of the speakers in that, but that might be the opportunity, because that was a pretty full, not super full, maybe there were 16 kids in there. Because I was also thinking along similar lines, maybe not just the focus on the college process, but also life skills, managing a budget, how to cook mac and cheese, how to fix a washer and dryer, just things like that. I mean, maybe. Yeah, I remember commenting on that last year. But that might be an opportunity to make that more robust. I know that the Jenga puzzle is crazy, but if it could be a more robust senior seminar that's maybe you just take it for a semester, a second semester, or even for a quarter, but you have like focus on college planning and focus on financial. I'm sure Brian Berkemeyer would love to teach a course on managing your budget. I mean, that. So, I mean, that, I think it would be really interesting to see something like that, something as a unique offering at the high school.
Yeah. One of the standards for proficiency-based diploma is a financial literacy standard. So
good to know. Great.
Did I gather correctly that you guys divide up your students so that you have some seniors, some and that's great. Jeremy,
First of all, just kind of echo what others said. I still don't quite know how you guys do it with threes. It's just amazing that you're pulling that off. Could you talk a little bit more about the challenge day and what that entails and how that works?
Haven't, because you've done it more than I have.
I know. I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm a chatty one. Oh, good. Okay. So Challenge Day, it's this organization. They go all over the country, and it's team building. But what they do is it's a full day-long intensive process, and there are oh gosh, how many adults? 30 plus adults, because what they do is they break the students up into small, they call them family groups. And so there's one adult and then four, sometimes they try to keep it to 4 students. Sometimes if they don't have enough adults, they'll push it to 5. And so they start out with like some really low-key get to know yous, like high fives and like easygoing team building activities that just seem like games. And the next thing you know, you are like bearing your soul and you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets, and you don't even realize you're going to be doing that. It really breaks down the walls. But all of it is meant for the students to understand that everybody's dealing with something, and you don't really know until maybe you take the time to ask, or maybe it's not such a good plan to judge somebody. And the hope is that by the end of it, they're all feeling a little more connected with one another, that now they've started to get to know each other a little bit better, and maybe they will reach out to that person that they never thought that they ever could talk to about, wow, we have a lot in common, and that type of stuff. So it is a full day. It's emotional for the kids. It's emotional for the adults, because the adults are just as much a participant as the kids are. All of the counselors participate, and most of the 9th grade teachers, and then some of the teachers that haven't done it, I think, are getting on board this year to have that same experience. But it's powerful for everyone involved, and it really does. I think it's great this year that, or actually the last 2 years, we've gotten to do it in the beginning of the school year, because I think it did make a difference for kids for the end of the school year last year, where the first year we had snow days or something, and so we didn't do it till January. And it wasn't too late, but it just would have been nice to have it just a little bit earlier. So I think timing is really good.
Last one. The financial piece of the college application. I know that you guys have great workshops, and we have a 10th grader currently. We crashed the workshop last year. We were not supposed to be there because it was for 11th and 12th grade parents. It was extremely useful, and we as parents of 9th graders were thinking, we wish we had had this information available when our kid was in 7th grade, or the earlier the better, because a lot of what was presented there was long range planning. So if you guys could ever consider having those types of workshops for parents of younger kids, that would allow parents to plan ahead a little more, because by the time you get to 11th grade, you can start putting money into your college savings account. It's just too late. So early is better. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I not?
You did, but I gave you. Thank you. You doing that?
Yes. So you gonna stay there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, you should have in your packets the handout of the presentation. And the lights are already off, which is great. Is everybody where they want to be? Okay. Good evening. So I am presenting an overview. I think it was sometime last spring, maybe when we were going through the scorecards. There was a request to give a broad look at what assessments we are, or some of the assessments that we are doing in RSU 5. So that's the focus of this evening's presentation. So I thought I'd start out with this little clip, and as we talk about the assessments this evening, I think this is a good slide to keep in mind that a standardized test is just one of many measures, and we've talked about that many times in board meetings. And like a pediatrician, when you go to the doctor, you look at multiple measures to monitor your child's health, and educators use multiple measures to monitor student progress. So we can keep that in mind as we go through this evening. So this is just a graphic that I'm going to share with you this evening. We're going to go left to right across the top, and I'm going to just explain these assessments are the ones that are in the presentation tonight. So as we go through the slides, these are the assessments that I will be delving into a little bit deeper. So this graphic is intended to show you on the left side the grade level, and where you see the little diamonds in the grids, that is where those assessments take place, left to right. So the first column is the Fontes and Pinnell. You might have also heard it as the F&P assessment. That is given in grades K through 8. And that's a benchmark assessment that we're giving in the spring. And it's used to determine the independent reading level of the students. So the teachers during the school year use other measures to monitor, to progress monitor. They use the Teachers College assessment throughout the year, but this is at the end of the year. We determine where those students are at and how much they've grown. And we'll get more into that in a minute. The next one on the top, it says MAP, and so that's a measure of academic progress. That is actually what the assessment is. It's not the NWEA. The NWEA is the company that puts it out, but everybody refers to that. So I thought this would be an opportunity to give you that little piece of education around that. So I'll refer to it as that MAP assessment and NWEA interchangeably so that you'll get used to that. Measure of academic progress, and that will be on the slide that's coming up. And that's a computer assistive test, but we'll get into that a little bit more deeply. So we are doing the administration of MAP in grades 2 through 10. And if you remember in the scorecard at grade 10, it was, we had some participation. So we started in 2 through 10 so that when we measure at the end of 3rd grade, we have that beginning of 2nd grade to show the growth for 3rd grade. That's why we started it at the end of 2nd grade. And then the next one you're familiar with, MEA. Sometimes it's also referred to as the Empower test because they've changed. Remember, a couple years ago was SBAC and used to be NECAP, but it is still the MEA. That stayed consistent. But you might also hear the term Empower, and that's the same. So that is given in the spring. There's a 4-week window in March, and in grades 3 through 8. And then you'll see in science, it's given in the next column over at the end of grades 5, 8, and 11. And I think that Dana mentioned that today in her presentation. And then she also, Liz and Dana mentioned the PSAT. That was, she and I had some conversation, and Jen, Jen's gone. And we talked about that last year so that the kids could have I don't want to say practice run, if you will. It is a good predictor of how they will do on the NWEA, and they can have a chance to address the areas that they need to work in so that they have more success on the SAT in the 11th grade. And so this year in October, we had everyone in 10th grade take that assessment, and I think she shared with you that we will get the results back in December. And then, of course, the SAT. And the reason I put SAT/MEA because the state of Maine also uses it as our MEA assessment, and that's in grade 11. So if you, the next slide. So before we look at those assessments that I just shared with you or outlined on the last slide, I wanted to point out that assessments generally fall into one of two categories. The first one I have on this slide is formative assessments. And you may also hear these referred to as assessments for learning. So this informs our instruction, and they align to our daily or weekly learning intentions. You might also hear that referred to as learning targets, what you want the students to learn that day. And then there are many types. There's teacher observations, there's student self-assessments. Sometimes when students finish a lesson, they have an exit ticket that they are going to respond to, and they turn it into the teacher, and that gives them teacher information about what they're going to do or how they might adjust their lesson or create strategy groups for the next day. So those are all information to adjust your teaching, and it's informing your instruction for the next day. That's why it's called formative assessment. And these may or may not be graded. Oftentimes these are not graded. It's not to be punitive. It's, when you arrive, but on the way, there's confusions that have to be ironed out, or some additional teaching that needs to be ironed out. So that's formative. This next slide, this other category, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of dryness. The second type of assessment is called summative assessment. And you may also hear the terminology assessment of learning. So this assesses what they have learned. The MEA, for example, at the end of the year assesses what they have learned all throughout that year. We have some common assessments that are given by grade level sometimes, and a couple of examples of that would be like big ideas. At the end, they have an end of year assessment. They have some checkpoints along the way. Everyday Math has an end of year assessment. Our Teachers College writing units of study. We have post assessment. So once the unit is finished, they take that post assessment to see what they actually learned in that writing. And then there's some other examples up there of summatives, and those are typically graded assessments. So back to that first column from that chart that you saw when we started, the Fontes and Pinnell. It's also, and I'm trying to be cognizant of the acronyms and explaining what they are, because we are so filled with acronyms in education. So this is a benchmark assessment system, and so if you talk in a group, if you walked into a room with a group of teachers, they'd be saying the BAS. They call it the BAS for short, and that's a reading assessment. So this is used as an end of grade summative, as we talked about earlier. So this is the end of year in K-8, and identifies the student's independent reading level determined by the accuracy, the fluency, and the comprehension. All those three things are factored into where they end up for their independent level. And it also shows the growth of a student and can provide a starting place for instruction. And I think I mentioned that there's teachers are progress monitoring throughout the year, taking running records, using the Teachers College, and so forth, so that it's not just they wait till the end of the year. They don't just use the spring assessment from the year before and then wait till the end of the year to see how the child's doing. They have a good sense of where that student will fall prior to the end of the year because of all of the formative assessments that they're doing along the way. Okay. So this is the map in the parentheses, measure of academic progress. That's the actual, what the acronym stands for. And I think I had mentioned this during a prior presentation that it's a computer adaptive test, and that's called the CAT. That's another acronym that's used. So this is how this works. So you get if you're sitting in front of the computer, you get a question. So if you look at the left of your graphic, I get that one right. I go up on the up arrow, and that check mark means I got it right. And then I shoot over to a higher level question. I get that question. I don't have a Can you follow what I'm saying? Okay. And if I get that question right, I go to another higher level question. If I get that second question wrong, I go to the lower level question. At the very beginning, if I got that question incorrect, then I go to a lower level question. And then if I get that right, I go up. So what it's doing is it's seeking and sorting to find that level where you're going to get 50% of those questions correct. That's what it's looking for. So it's individualized because the person sitting next to me is not getting the same questions as I am, because they may have gotten all of them right. I may not have gotten any of them right. So we're working at different levels, but it's sorting so that I can get at the level. My results will show you the level I am, and then I'm going to find out where I need to have instruction. And we'll talk. You're going to see a couple of graphics coming up in a couple minutes that will give you some more information about that. So this is administered in reading and math in grades 2 through 8. That's what that column that on that chart showed you before. It provides growth and average projected growth and achievement data. And then it's approximately 50 to 60% of the students nationwide meet or exceed those growth projections. So remember how we talked earlier when we talked about the scorecard. You know, there's a projection that you grow a certain number, 9 points, for example. Well, approximately 50 to 60% nationwide meet or exceed their growth projections. So that's important information to know when we look at the data. It provides information for differentiation of instruction. So they have done a lot of work in having the ability to go in to the system and dig down and drill down to the areas where students might need some differentiation. They call these ladders, and then there can be instruction, specific to the students, and they could be grouped for that specific instruction. So it does provide us information for some differentiation of instruction, and it's administered annually in the spring. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to mention is as the standards change, the NWEA, the company itself, they realign they realign the questions, and so those RIT scores still maintain the same meaning in terms of academic difficulty. And so when they make the changes, those new versions don't significantly impact the student scores, because you might hear from time to time they adjust the questions, but the way that they do it in the background is it's not going to, if you look at last year's score and the growth that they make the next year, it should not significantly impact the results. So they're just, if they modify those tests to align with the standards, they assure us of that. Okay, so here's an example of a map item, and this one happens to be numbers and operations in grades 2 through 5. So the student score suggests that, you want to blow that up, Trevor? Can you make that one come in a little bit closer so everybody can see? A little bit back the other way. Okay, that's pretty good. Perfect. So a student's score suggests currently that he or she is likely to get about half of the questions of this difficulty correct. In this example, if a student's score ranges from, if you look at the right, if a student's score is between 221 and 230, they are likely to get most of the questions in the 211 on the left to 220 range correct, assuming that they've had instruction on that skill. So that is an example on the right of a question that a student might get when taking that computerized test. That's an example of a question that would fall in that RIT range. RIT's another acronym. It's a Rosh unit, and I can't explain any more than that, Sarah. I'm sorry. It stands for Rosh unit, so it's a unit of measure. Okay, so if I'm in the 220 to 230 range, and I would get that. I may get that question correct, but that's an example of a question. If that's my 50% range, where I'm getting half those questions right in 221 to 230 range, I would be expected to get any question that's posed to me, like the one on the left, I would expect to get most of those questions correct. I can repeat that. Does that make sense? Okay, good, great.
Don't ask us to answer those questions.
Okay, and if we could blow this one up a little bit. Oh, no. I just pulled an example of a question. There's way down to 100.
What the number that you had at the top of the page, or at the top of the chart, the 220, the range, 221 to 230.
It is not.
That's not what their initial RIT was.
No. I was just pulling an example of two questions side by side to show you that how that 50% works. That if I was getting questions on my test that were between the 221 to 230, and that was where my score fell in that range, that the questions that I would get, that would come up, because they would go up and down, I would be expected to get all of the ones that were in that lower range correct, and only half of the ones in the other range correct.
The RIT score you get is the bucket that you get halfway.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It is complicated. It really is. So this is an example of a student. No, it's Marcus McCrae, and if you look at the top, it's Marcus McCrae, and then it says District NWEA sample, and this is from the Mount Bachelor Middle School. So I just pulled this example to kind of take you through. So if you also look across, remember we talked about the norm reference data. This is 2015 was the last time that they normed this assessment. Usually it's done every 3 to 4 years. And this particular district chooses to look at the growth comparison from fall to fall. And remember, we're doing spring to spring. Okay, so then if we go, I'm going to take you through the math example. But so remember, a specific RIT score represents the difficulty of questions that a student can answer correctly about half the time. That difficulty level is a point where a student is ready to learn, because he or she is between knowing and not knowing the answer. So they might know parts of it, but they don't know all of it. So let's take a look at Marcus. They test from fall to fall, and in the fall, if we can zoom in a little bit more, okay, and then, oh, that's good, all right. So if we want to look at, let's see, the fall of Marcus's 8th grade, he was at, I think I need you to go to the left just a little bit so we can see that number, Trevor. Okay, perfect. So he is the blue line. Do you see that blue line? That's the student. And the dot is, do you see where it's at 225? Can everybody see that on the left where the lines are? The blue line is 225. So now just take your eyes over to the right side, and that's, if you look back at the grid, if you look back at the graph, it's the fall. Do you see it says on the bottom FA 14? That's when he was assessed, fall 14. So now if you go over to the right side and you go down where it says fall 14, it's the 1, 2, 3, the 4th entry on that chart, which says fall 14. So that was his 8th grade year in the fall. You'll see 3 sets of numbers there, those RIT scores. Well, the one on the left and the one on the right are 1 standard deviation away. So the center number is at 225. Okay, so that's the score that he has. Then if you would slide it over a little bit. So then, remember how I said it's fall to fall? So you see there's 2 more columns to the right of his score. We had the RIT growth and the growth projection. So if you look at the fall 14 and you go to the right and you see the RIT growth you see the RIT growth of the fall 14. Actually, you want to go up to the fall 15, I'm sorry. It's -3. Because if you look back to where the RIT score is, he now has a 222. Do you see that? Let me see if I can. Okay. So fall 15, if you look at the top row, he's now a 9th grader. That center number is 222. That was his score in the fall of 9th grade. His score in the fall of 8th grade was 225. So you see on the RIT growth, he actually went down 3 points. Do you see that? Okay.
And this is one that just goes up sort of for like you would be at your lowest score in your earliest grade, and it builds. It's not like your assessment that year, where, right? I mean, it's always expected to be going.
Yes, yes, that's correct. Yep. So if you look back now, I want to take you still back to that graphic. See the fall 14. If you go to the fourth column at the growth projection, at 225, he was expected to grow by 6, and he did not. Yes, so he should have had like a 231. That was his expected growth. Right, and so remember that statistic that 50 to 60% meet the growth target.
How many of them go backwards?
Very few. This was just an example I happened to find. Yep. Very few. So I can show you that. Let's go back to the left and look at the district. So if you look at the legend on the bottom, the one with the orange is the district mean. So as a district that this student was in, NWEA sample district, 220 on the left is where the 8th grade was. And if you notice, the W just on the bottom, just to point it out, that means winter. Sometimes they choose to do a winter score, but it's not where they're measuring the growth. They're measuring the growth from fall to fall. So if you go to the end of where the orange dot is, you can see there is growth. And it's not unusual to see a slight dip maybe from the summer, from spring to, see how it goes from spring 15 to fall 15? It's not unusual to see that slight dip. So the answer to your question is, you said, you know, my example is an unusual example. You don't want to see that. When we look at individual data, if a principal's looking at the individual data for the students, you're hoping you see maybe one in a class, you know, if you're going to see them at all. You're hoping to see a lot different result.
This is a sample, obviously, but
yes.
Presuming that they are giving this test 3 times a year?
No, that doesn't matter. That doesn't change it. Sometimes they're given a survey test. There's a shorter version in the winter. Sometimes they're given, that doesn't alter the results, if that's what you're asking.
So we just do it, we would just have fall of 14, fall of 15, fall of 16.
Right.
We wouldn't have these interim
Right.
testing, right?
Right. Some, like, you can. We have a license to do it 4 times a year if we wanted to. So that's what we pay for. So sometimes you might have a population of students that you want to do a check on that are receiving some intensive instruction, and you might want to do a check on that. So we, for example, in my former district, we had some Title I students, and the decision was made by that committee to give another assessment mid-year to see how they were doing. So, and you could just do it in reading if you wanted to, if that's all they were getting some services for. So you have opportunities. Sometimes in special ed, they might choose to do that. So it's, you have the option. You don't have to do that. This just has it as an example. And we're doing, remember, spring to spring now. Yeah. So I'm not going to take you through the reading just because it would be the same exact example. It's showing you the reading. And Trevor? And if you want to just go back to that slide, you see the dotted line. I won't have, oh wait, I could go back. Well, see that blue line? That was the student. So that projected, see that dotted line? That if you look at what that number would be, that would be where his projection was for the next fall. So that's how that goes. Okay, so the MEA. Yes. Oh, sure. It's probably better to ask it then.
Yeah, because it is about the projection. Do the when we send these progress reports home, do we have that dotted line?
So they have different looks. I'm not sure if this is this is not the snapshot that you see. Yeah. So they look a little different, and they're in the process of making some changes, but you're going to get the same information. You're going to get the RIT score. You will get the projected growth on there. It just, that graphic looks different.
Do you have any idea why the projected growth would be to go up when the trend is that it went down? Is it because, again, it is based on
that particular student?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how I don't know what happened in Marcus's life. I don't know, what his instruction was, who his teacher was.
No, I understand. I was wondering, do you know what the statistics are behind?
How many go down?
No, just why would you project a student to grow when they didn't grow?
So it's all based on norms. So basically the 2015 norms and how they scored, and how it's all based on numbers of students that it's based on a number of students that took it in that same grade level and how they performed. Okay. So
it goes back to the fact that it's looking not at his trend, but at
correct
his RIT of 222.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's important to point out there that the blue, I think, is the student, and the district overall on that assessment is not doing well at that grade level. But you can see that the national norm is not meant to go down.
The yellow one.
Which is the yellow.
Yeah. Good point. Do I need to go back to the slide?
I don't need a slide.
Okay.
My brain is grasping, it's struggling with how is it helpful to know a growth projection that 60% of the students might make. Like, that's not very, I don't know, my brain is just struggling to say, how is that data point valuable to us? It seems more confusing than helpful.
I think there's a lot of value in informing your instruction, because you're knowing and they break it down even further. Like, they break it down by number sense. It doesn't get necessarily reported out in the detail like that, but they break it down by number and operations, algebraic thinking. So where it's really a great way. You get achievement data and growth data, right? And you get to look deeper in instruction as well. And they're doing more and more work. So it's good data to have, to use for instruction, to see where students are lagging, where they have lagging skill sets, and where they have strengths. So I still see your...
I think that, to me, when I was reading about this, it became apparent that it's really useful on an individual basis. And for a student, on an individual basis, family and a teacher looking at individual student, or a small cohort. For us as a district, what it's more useful is not the growth target, but where we are in relation to the 50%. Are we below it, or are we above it? Because we don't want, if you're below it, you don't want to be there. You want to be at least at 50 or a little bit higher. Statistically, you are really challenged to be above the 50%.
Right.
And so if we are above it as a district, that is a good thing. Yeah.
And I would...
So
she's recanting her wanting 100%.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's
yeah.
right. Well, no, I mean, we were talking about GP students last time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would expect that.
They would be in the highest percentile, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right. And we did see that, because I think some were at certain...
I did the
I can't remember now.
recalculation
There
with
was
the
some
kids that
70%.
were not there. Remember? Yes, so we did see that.
And it was
Go
like
up.
70s, right?
Yeah.
So like, to me, as a district, our target should not be the growth, what we're calling a growth target, but it should be, we should have some benchmark of, we want to be at 60%, or, you know.
So we did that as an administrative team for between 40 and 60%, the fifth quintile. we did make that, and I think we mentioned that at one of the board meetings that we had recently. But the administrators got together and we talked about, do we want to look at 50th percentile? Do we want to look 50 to 60? And we landed on, because there's several reports that you can pull, and one of the reports had broken it into quintiles, and the 40th to 60th percentile is where, through a lot of conversation, as an administrative team, we landed. So that's where we're looking.
I think we did that for the academic achievement piece.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
And
that's
so,
correct.
Kate, I agree with you that we're not going to see 100%. For a community like ours, you have to remember we're being compared to, inner city schools. So I would hope that we could at some point consistently hit at least 60% would be a good target. And I think above that would be, celebration. And you're right. Then when you start getting far below that, that's an area of concern. It's an area to dig further and to look at addressing that.
So why is the target of the administrative team
That's not the projected growth.
Yeah, I spoke in air. It's achievement.
Yes, it was just because and we don't have a picture of the data, the scorecard here, but when we said how many of our students on the NWEA are reaching proficiency on the NWEA, because for every grade they give you like a number. Yeah. We went with what they recommended, the NWEA. That's where what they consider proficient. It falls between the 40th and the 60th percentile.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I confused that issue. Yeah. Any more on that? Okay, MEA. So the Maine Educational Assessment measures the progress of Maine's career and college readiness standards and provides information about the progress of students in the schools and the state, and you can go onto the public site and get all of that information, and assesses math, ELA, and science, as you saw on the chart at the beginning, and requires a participation rate of 95% of our students. Contains multiple choice and extended response questions, which is different than the NWEA and the NWA, and then it's also administered online, except at the high school. So here's an example of an MEA sample question. So at first glance, you might think that this is a multiple choice question, and it's actually an extended response question. So there's multiple steps to this. They have to write an equation, they have to solve problems, they have to do calculations, algebraic calculations in this, and then they have at the end use an equation to show or explain your work. So there's lots of levels to this, and typically there are 4 points. You may get 1 point for A, 1 point for B, 2 points for C, or it just depends on how much they weight them. But so these are types of questions that we now have in our math programs. We have a lot of open response questions. They've with the new version, and so they're getting some practice samples throughout their daily curriculum, and so this is just a really good example of what a 7th grade student is asked to answer in math.
Does this one also do the base your next question on?
No, it is not. No, it's not computer assisted. So everyone in 7th grade has the same questions unless there's field test questions in them. So sometimes there's field test questions that they're trying out for a future test that don't count. But everybody has the same basic questions. I mean, they're the same questions in the same grade.
And Cynthia, it said it requires 95% participation. What happens if you don't have? Are you penalized in some way?
You get publicly pummeled, So the reports that they'd send out yearly for adequate progress would show that you're in trouble because you didn't have the 95%. We have always had the 95%, so we're good.
So would you have to
encourage?
We do encourage, yep, at the building level. I'm sure that they're sending out information that the MEAs are coming and, get a good night's sleep, have a good breakfast. We are, they talk it up with the students. And so, we do our best to communicate that out to families.
And
no, it's in March and April. So it's the last 2 weeks of March. And the first 2 weeks of April, the window closes the day before break. So what happens is there's a schedule made, and the principals work with technology. Sometimes they'll decide they may not want to do it the first day or two because sometimes statewide or just internally there might be some technology issues, there are bugs to work out with the system. So there's decisions made that way. Sometimes you might, if there's another assessment coming up, like gate testing, for example, of the COGAT, or the science MEAs for 5th grade, is they might do them first because then they have more time in between doing their next assessment. So the principals make strategic decisions based on, what's best for kids. But there is that 4-week window. Typically, you don't use the last week window for anything other than makeups.
And do the MEA scores reflect, do you get responses back from that, and can you use that as a, or is this just for broad
so
planning,
you don't,
or?
Yes, you get a family, the families or the students all get scores that are reported out, and they are given to families. They come, now they come electronically, and they print them out, and I send a reminder out that they need to go out by such and such a date, and then there's a cover letter they can use or adapt to go out with that explains a little bit in more detail. The letter itself has a good explanation, but there should be a cover letter that comes with it. And then if you have questions specific to your student, you would either contact the administrator at the building or the teacher or both to have any of your questions answered. What was the other part of your question?
Just curious if it was a tool that was used, more specifically for the individual or for more broadly for the school district.
So we also have some release questions, like they'll release the results from the prior year so that a teacher can actually use those types of questions. Like if she looks at her data, like they should be looking at their data in their building level. They might look at it through PLC. They might look at it as math teachers. They might look at it as a whole school, and then dig down into, if everyone in 7th grade got question 3 wrong and they all chose the same wrong answer, what is it that in our instruction we're miscommunicating? So you get that level of data. You can tell what the students answered. They have the listed all the kids' answers for the administrative level and then the teacher level, so that the teacher knows how they answered the question, how many, if there's 3 extended response questions and everyone only got 1 point, right? Well, we really need to be spending more time on those open-ended response questions. So it gives the teachers and the administrators really good information as to what we're doing well and where we need to put our energy, and it also categorizes it by geometry. We did really well with numbers and operations, but our geometry scores and geometry and measurement scores are very low. What is that unit? What's in that unit? Are we making sure we're doing all the components of that unit? Have we left something really critical out of it? Are we doing the games? Those kinds of things. So it's not just a number that comes back. It's a summative, like we talked about, but it's also informing instruction.
So, I like what Kate said earlier about the NWEA. Like, what's helpful to the parent is your kid hitting the projection. What's helpful to the district is what percentage of kids are hitting their projection.
Right.
What I hear you saying about the MEA is that it's really
So there's the levels of proficiency, and are they so basically it's a measure of the standards that we're expecting our students to know by grade level. So you get the score on those reports, and it tells you what level of proficiency they're at. Are they at state standards? Are they below state standards? Are they well below state standards? And so or are they above state standards?
Give you like a little area, right? This is where they were, but it could be they were anywhere.
Right. Those confidence interval. If you took it on a different day, you could have been a few, 5 points higher or lower, right? So it is that's the thing to remember too. It's a test on, I don't know if it's Jen or something that said that last time. These are tests that are given on one given day, and so you look at that confidence interval to say, they on a different day, when that bar, as a parent, when you look at it and that bar goes into that upper level, you're like, they could have, if it was a different day, So, yeah. So it's great information for everybody. Okay.
I was just going to say, I think that the MEA also, does that show district level as well?
Yes. So it you should have district level, school level, state level. So you can, and it's always nice to see, we did better than the average of the state, right? So, and remember we changed something on the scorecard so that you could see how, I think we added a piece so that we could see how we compare to the state. I mean, we want to compare ourselves, I think we compare ourselves to some area districts, we want to compare ourselves to the state, but we also want to be better within as well, regardless of how the state, does.
Just a quick question about more focus towards high school students taking these exams. More towards 9th or 10th graders, will that information, their results, be relayed to their guidance counselors, affecting their course selections for the next year? I know you said it'll affect what the teacher's teaching at the time, we need to be better in geometry or something like that, but would it influence we're going to put them in a higher level class for next year, or maybe we should keep them at a different level?
That's a great question. So they have guidance counselors all have access to PowerSchool, and all of the data is put into PowerSchool. So they do have all of that information, and I think that, for example, those students that we talked about last time with the GATE assessment, those class decisions are made of, what's their pathway going to be. So there are definitely decisions made based on. I wish the guidance counselors were here to answer you more specifically, but there are definitely decisions about courses based on what your scores are. And they have access, and then the SAT, which we're going to talk about now, they get direct access to that. As you heard Mrs. Clark mention, she's the overseer of all of the SAT and PSAT, so I actually call her. And we talk through reports. We both have access, and we talk through reports together. So, but I think that's a great question, and I know that they are using it. I'm not, you'd have to ask her more specifically. I don't want to answer for her, but I know they are using that to help with course selection in at least, GATE and beyond. So,
but I think it would be important to also say that I can't think of beyond GT, right, the GATE, I can't think of a time that a student would be kept out of if they wanted
AP class.
An AP class. No one would say to them, I see on the MEA you didn't do well, so we're not going to enroll you. My understanding, if kids want to select into those highest level classes, they're allowed to do so.
That's correct. Yeah.
And in my experience, how you perform in prior courses has a lot more bearing than just one single data point from a test that you took on one day. So they look at that pretty closely, and they talk to your prior teachers too.
I wonder if they could use that as a lever to try and encourage more participation. I mean, that seems to be the issue in the 9th and 10th grade with getting kids to take the test.
Right.
You made it that it actually impacted something that was not that they
Yeah.
poorly, and then they take it even worse.
I think the positive part about the SAT is that they have to take it to get into school, so that there's not, you don't get the opt out, but with the NWEA, it's not. So I, Dana and Liz stole my next two slides, which is great because I'm just going to repeat them. It's the same data that she gave you. That this year we decided to give the students an opportunity to have a practice of what the SAT test is like, and it's the exact same kinds of questions. And then it was optional for anybody in grade 11 because it's in the fall where their SAT is the spring. And it's administered in October, and it is also multiple choice. And then maybe we can blow this up a little bit, Trevor. So this is the SAT. This is paper pencil. And it is. Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. So the essay. So this is interesting. So when it's given in school, the essay is given. When they take it, if they take it another time, outside of school, like we had one student abroad, and she took it, and it's not part of it. Because that's a main, it's part of the main requirement. Yes, the SAT. Yeah, so it's like 1,800, 2,400. So the essay part is, there's writing that's part of the ELA though. So it's paper pencil, so it's incorporated. But the essay part really was to mirror what a typical college class would be expecting of a student to be able to perform when they're doing papers at the college level. Can we make that a little smaller, Trevor? Just a little bit. And it's in April. I think she told you the date was April 11th, if I'm not mistaken, for this year. It was the 5th last year. It's used to determine achievement levels in evidence-based reading and writing. So they incorporate writing into that, math, and then the essay. And, and it's multiple choice except for the essay component. And so here's an example. They use a lot of science and social studies material in the reading passages. And so this is just an example of one of the questions. Which statement is supported by data represented in the table? And this is all about, which I don't know this, but it's it's in the asteroid belt. I had to look that up because I didn't know the response to that. But, and it's so large that it's in between Jupiter and Mars, and it's so, is that right? Yeah, Jupiter, Mars, and it's so large that it gets in the orbit of Neptune. I looked this up today because I'm like, I don't know this. But of course I didn't read the passage, right? This was just one of the questions. So they have to read the passage critically and think about, what the question is asking, and then respond. So that's just an example of one of the questions that's on the SAT. Let's see. Oh, the other thing that's new that I don't have in the slide is that the SAT, and Dana and I had talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There's a new online reporting platform, and they can also dig down into the areas that the students don't necessarily do well in, and they can work to assist the students so that the next time they take the SAT, their scores will improve.
When you say they, you mean our guidance office? How new is that?
It's like hot off the press new. In fact, I'm going to a training next week. I wish I had gone this week. It's on the 13th, Monday the 13th. And they're going to talk about that.
Is that the plan, to review the 11th grade mandatory thing and help students determine if they need to take it again?
We haven't had any discussion on that yet. So I got the information, and we have the availability to do it. She was very aware of that, so I'm sure that they have looked, have discussed it. But I can't answer for her at this moment in time. But I can get you that information.
It's kind of an exciting proposition.
It is. Yeah.
And
And
when
they color code them.
So Cynthia, when you have that information alongside, who is going to be responsible for actually reteaching? That will be interesting to know.
Yeah.
Who has the time and ability to do that? And whether we need more
And maybe
resources
they're
for that.
going, maybe, you know, I can envision some kinds of online help supports that they can go in, and they probably have some right through the College Board that can help them practice. So that's what I'm envisioning it might look like.
The NWEAs, so we know March to April, 4-week window for NEAs. When are the NWEAs?
So, Emily, yeah.
Essentially in April, except for the fifth
NWEA.
science, and then the end of, so it goes April NEA, fifth grade science, first week of May.
Yeah.
And then NWEA
Is May.
Right now, I think have a 2-week window scheduled, and then NWEA. So it ends up being end of May, early June.
Yeah, for the NWEA. Yeah. Correct. Because the we have choice in the NWEA. You know, we have a window of time, but the MEA is the time is, you know, set.
So we don't do any assessments in the fall at this point.
So
In the beginning of the year, do they do the Fontes and Pinnell?
So we're now doing spring to spring unless they're new students.
So I had a question about that because I feel like I went to my conference and she said the reading level she's at right now is bang. We just tested her last week.
Yes.
Been in school since.
So that's part of the formative. So I think
the
Cynthia mentioned earlier, don't think we're just giving it in the spring. So when they see that kids are ready to move up a level, they can test on that.
So that's
Fontes and Pinnell at any point. But as far as gathering the data for the scorecard, we're doing it in the spring.
But in the fall, the PSAT is administered. They just had it a few weeks ago.
October, yeah.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
But that's the only thing those guys are taking, right? The 10th graders.
Yes. And the NWEA.
I know you had a question about the SAT with the essay, and I know that the first time it is required, but if a student, like I took it last Saturday, if you do decide to take it again, thankfully not, because I do not know the answer to that question.
But you would have read it and you would have got it right.
Exactly.
Underneath the passage.
I actually found out that if you decide not to take it without the essay, you get an extra section, which can be any either reading, English, math with a calculator, without a calculator. So you still get that extra 5th section, but it doesn't always have to be an essay.
That's interesting.
You can sort of opt out of the essay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
When I look at the schedule and I look at like 3rd through 8th grade, it's just like mind crushing that there's so much testing happening. And do we have an idea like how many hours of testing the kids are getting during that time? Because
So typically the NWEA can be done in, the math would be done in about an hour. So it might be during, I'm not sure when each school does it, but I'm going to give you an example. They might take a math class and it's done in that 1 hour of math. So it's during when they would have had math. The same is true for the reading. So those are each an hour. So reading and math. So there would be 2 hours for that. The MEA is divided into sessions. And so I'm going to say, what would you say, maybe 6 hours?
Yeah, 2 reading, that are 7
Through math, yeah.
2 math, and 2 shorter writing interventions.
It's about 6 to 7 hours total, but it's not in the same day. You know, they space out the sessions. And
so I guess it's more of a philosophical question and maybe too big to tackle now, but I mean, there are kids who really do stress out and don't do well with and I know the schools do a great job, you know, anticipating that and helping them prepare for that. But I I love understanding all these details and know that it gives us so much important information, but I just wonder if it's too much. And I wonder if that's ever a discussion that the board has had or would have. Is it too much or is it not enough? Like, what's an appropriate amount of testing?
I think the interesting thing is you know, the NWEA is really the only one we have the option. MEA we have to do by state
Right.
requirement, and that's the 6 to 7 hours, right? I mean, the
Right.
NWEA, which is sort of our elective testing that we do, is only 2 hours.
Roughly. Depends on the student, but yeah.
And also in the past, what's happened is that the state has changed the test that they administer. So we as a board have chosen to do the NWA consistently because that is the only test that gives us the historical data that we need to have to identify trends over time. And frankly, I mean, our kids all take these tests, and yeah, some do stress more than others, but at the same time, without this data, you can't really strategize where you put your resources to move the school forward. So I think it's one of these things that people may not understand fully what the impact is of having the data, but if they did, there would be a lesser resistance to it, because I think it's really valuable to have the data. And in the bigger picture, it's 8 hours, 9 hours out of the year. It's really not that much.
I was just going to say too, with Fontes and Pinnell, I mean, to show it on here from K to 8 makes it look like a test. It's not a test. It's a program really, and so I mean, you almost can kind of like take that off, and you know, then you look at the MEA is 2 lines. I mean, I think it looks more overwhelming than it really is.
Thank you.
I would say the NWEA is our only national data point. So that's another reason why I think it's nice to have a state test. And then the NWEA gives us like nationally normed. The Fontes and Pinnell does too, I guess, because it's used all over the United States.
Do we pay for our students to take the PSAT and the SAT?
Yes. Yes, we do.
I just want to remind people we have 2 more presentations.
So I'd like to end with the last slide, is remember test scores and measures of achievement tell you where a student is, but they don't tell you where a student could end up. And that's from Carol Dweck. And she's all about, I don't know if you've heard of Carol Dweck, but she's done lots of research around mindset, and that you're not born with a fixed amount of brain power, that, you know, it's about a growth mindset. So I thought I would leave you with that last slide. Thank you. You're next. I'll leave this up for you. No.
I just wanted to know, for the SAT, do we get national data for that? Or the PSAT?
I think the way, Cynthia, the way the SAT results are normed is more how, when we get the data back, we're seeing how we're comparing with the rest of the state. But I don't think it would be hard to get nationally normed. Like, what is the norm?
You asking for the SAT?
Yeah, SAT.
Well, we said the NWA was really the only one we have national data for, and I was thinking, well, the SAT is national.
But I think of that the way the state does it and presents us with the data. It's more how we're doing statewide. But we could use it as national. And the F&P, really, those are the Fontes and Pinnell. They use it across the United States.
Emily.
Good evening. This Sunday morning, Julie and I were driving down to Boston for a conference together at 6 a.m. and had this moment we were talking about tonight. We're like, you know what would be great? Let's ask Becky to move the assessment presentation before our presentations, because it'll set the context.
Wait, you asked for this?
Yes, they did.
So, it was
Note
about,
to self.
Note to self, this is usually when I'm about getting into bed. So that's the downside. The good side is I think what our presentations will do will be to help contextualize some of the information you just got. So I actually think it's a really great thing. So I'll try to take note of that as we dig in. So I'm going to tell the story of last year and this year together to really paint this picture of multi-year trajectories and thinking about how do we get growth over time and how do our efforts shift.
Can I just let folks know that in your folder, because I know not everybody opens their purple folder if you brought your packet from home, they did add the goals for both the schools from last year, just to reference what Emily's going to tell us. Sorry, carry on.
No problem. So I'll start. We really had two arms of focus last year. One that was academic in nature, looking at student achievement as measured by standardized test results, and the other looking at school culture and climate. And I'll start with the academic piece, which was really grounded in more frequently and effectively using data to target students at all quartile levels. So Cynthia was talking about the NWEA and how the NWEA sets a growth target, and what we had done as a building is said, how are we doing at growing kids at all levels? So kids that are below grade level, kids that are right where you'd expect them to be, and kids that are above grade level. And one of the things we noticed was that we were less effective with our higher achieving kids. And so this is one area where that growth measure can be really a useful target or a useful piece of information to have. So last year we were looking at trying to grow kids at each quartile. In other words, really focusing effort across all our kids. And to do that, increased opportunities to look at student data. So if you think of that pediatrician photo right at the beginning of Cynthia's presentation, we want to make sure we're using multiple measures. So when I take my kid into my pediatrician, I hope they take, my child's temperature, but I hope they do other things as well. And so you can imagine the NWA or MEA being the thermometer, but also conversation with my student or with me about their, demeanor or crankiness or whatever it may be. So last year, we were really focused on what data do we have daily in the classroom, that formative data. How can we use that to inform what we're doing daily in small groups, in whole group instruction, one-on-one with students? And so we created several opportunities last year to do this systemically. In other words, our whole school, every teacher in a room doing this together. And it was really creating the foundation for what this work looks and sounds like. So there's one additional paper, as if you didn't have enough, to give you a little sense of what this looks like. So there's two protocols that are now put in practice in our building. The one that's facing up is called the stack audit protocol, and this is just a way to go through student work. It's not about scoring work. It's about understanding what skills students have now and where room is to push in for their growth. So on the top, you'll see the protocol. It's simple. It's designed to be simple. It's designed for a team to be able to do this in the collaborative time they have, which is about 40 minutes. And then on the bottom, you'll see that was just an example from a team doing this work in January of saying, what do we notice in this sample of student work and what are some areas that we could teach in? So a teacher may provide a whole class instruction in response, but they also may pull a couple students. They realize some students for example, may need some support in units and how to define units in some of their geometry work, or there might be larger whole group lessons. The other side has another protocol called thin slicing, which is something we frequently do with our teachers' college work and reading or writing. Again, it's just another way of qualitatively looking at student work to inform instruction. And what's really helpful about this versus looking at an NWA or MEA is it informs what you can do tomorrow. It's really difficult, I'd say impossible, to do that with an MEA or NWA at the granular instructional level. So that was the focus of our work last year. The great news is we started it, and we have two protocols in place. I joined a team meeting last week, and they were thin slicing. Without me there, without it being a faculty meeting, that to me is great work. So I feel like the foundations are there, but of course we had some learnings. Our data flatlined, so we didn't see the growth that we had hoped in each of the quartiles. And so of course our question was, okay, what learning can we have from this as we think about kind of a multi-year trajectory? Our leadership team felt like, we've got to narrow our focus. So last year we were looking at 2 content areas, really thinking about growing all kids. And the team felt really passionate about on our goal sheet, really identifying a specific area. And we had a lot of conversations about whether we should have a math and a reading goal, and they felt strongly that a math goal was more appropriate, primarily because all our quartiles in math are below that 50 percentile hitting growth target. So in other words, in math, fewer than half of the kids in our building are hitting the growth target that NWA is setting. Whereas in reading, it ranges from 56% to 75% depending on the quartiles. So in other words, our building average is just above 60%. So it's like that rah moment for reading, but not for math. And the team said, you know what, it just isn't, it doesn't mean we're not going to continue to focus on reading, but it doesn't feel right to have it on there when math should be such a focus for us. And so you'll see on this year's goal document that says 17-18 at the top, you'll see our baseline data, so that's where we are currently in terms of the percentage of kids hitting their growth target, and it's 38%. So it's room we see a real opportunity for improvement, and that's further narrowed to just our top half of students. So in other words, students who started at the 50th percentile and above. 38% of those kids, from the 50th to the 99th percentile, 38% last spring hit their growth target, and we would look to see an improvement of that in the coming spring when they take it again.
Emily, what would have the number been for the bottom 50% meeting the growth target?
For the bottom 50%, the average would be slightly higher than that. It's going to be about 46%. So we're going to do a couple things addressing this need. One is to utilize the foundation we've put in place where teams now have the skill set to engage in this work organically in their own teams, and we've allocated more time to that work. So every other faculty meeting now exists at the team level solely for this work. So it's protected for this work. So teams have one meeting a month that is designed just for this, not field trip planning, not troubleshooting a specific student's behavior, but doing this work. And honestly, it's a really hard thing in schools to protect that time because there's so many things competing for the time. The other question that came out of it, not only did the team ask, hey, maybe we should focus our work, or how can we better focus our work, was how do we create more systemic structures for responding to what we're noticing about students' needs. So it's one thing to have the time to do the data analysis. The other question is, okay, when do we teach into what we've learned about it? And so in 3rd and 4th grade, we're piloting what we're calling a lift block. It's 30 minutes 3 times a week where kids are reshuffled based on need. So for example, in our 3rd grade team, they use their reading pre-assessment for their first unit of the school year to make 5 different buckets. So there's a group focusing on fluency work, for example, a group focusing on drawing inferences as they read, a group that's pushing into the 4th grade standards around theme on the learning progressions. And so what this is kids get resorted. We have additional staff that join the team at that time. So some of the groups end up being significantly smaller than a full classroom. And that 30 minutes is targeted to what the team has seen in that pre-assessment. And so the hope is recognizing that, it's often our highest kids that we're not growing as effectively, that's the opportunity for those kids to get pushed into work that's often a full grade year ahead of where they're at. So that's something we're piloting in 3rd and 4th grade. We looked at a lot of different models, both in and outside the district, in determining how to do that. And the thing that I was a stickler about is if we created that, we were going to schedule in a way that added an additional PLC for those teams to plan that. Because where I've seen it fall short in other districts is to add the time to regroup students, but not add any time to plan for the regrouping of students. And then it falls flat, not because the structure was flawed, but because the planning was flawed. And so those 3rd and 4th grade teams have one additional team plan a week for the purpose of looking at student data, sorting kids, or they're in their process right now of resorting kids for the next rotation, which will be math focused, and then looking at the formative data they get from kids in those lift groups.
Do we call this different things in different schools?
Yes.
So this is the flex block that's in Durham,
Flex,
right?
lift, intervention. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can think of it as a block, essentially, where we're looking at skill-based grouping rather than true heterogeneous grouping, which is what we do in the rest of our school day.
So the lift logs, Emily, are just for math, or because you were describing an example with ELA, but then you said we're doing it for math. Is it for both?
So
or
when it
just
was
one?
designed, these conversations really began probably last March and April as we were starting to talk about the schedule for this coming year. And of course, we didn't have our NWA data then, but it was more of a conversation of like, it still feels like it's hard to address the needs that we're seeing in student work. So yeah, we're getting better at addressing what their needs are, but yes, it's still hard to respond to those needs. So as the leadership team began looking at different potential models and what that might look like and what the give and take was within our schedule, the lift block came to be before we saw the data for this year coming out of this spring's NWA. So the whole school looked at our school-wide data and said, why aren't we focusing on math? That's why you see the math goal. And then the leadership team narrowed that goal down. So my gut, so when we did our first lift block, which we started at the beginning of school, the whole school hadn't yet seen the data from the spring. We hadn't done that full-scale data analysis, which happened in mid-September. The next lift block will be math. There's a chance the following lift block and the following lift block and the following lift block after that may also be math. But that will come out of what we're seeing from student need.
And why is it lift block limited to 3rd and 4th? Is it a scheduling issue that you can't do lift block in 5th grade too, or the 5th graders don't need it as much?
When the leadership team drafted a couple of different options, there were a few options on the table, which was like full-scale implementation, 1 grade taking it on, or somewhere in between. And I actually put it to the grade level to make a decision about whether they wanted to be part of a pilot, and committing to scheduling in a way that truly supported the lift block, so that at the end of a year, if it works or if it doesn't, we know that we scheduled it in a way that really supported implementation, i.e. that additional collaborative time. If we were to add 5th, it actually becomes significantly more complicated, but not impossible. But I didn't want to create, the 5th grade team didn't opt in, and I didn't want to create the hurdle without knowing yet what some of the benefits and challenges. And I'll say honestly, the first rotation, we've had a lot of learning. And I think even over the course of this year, so as we go through these 6 to 8 week cycles, we're refining what that looks like. How do you sort kids? What data do you want to use? What's most helpful in what resources you pull in to support that? How you plan for it. So some of those learnings, I think will be powerful if and when we go to a full-scale implementation.
So it's an effective way of delivering instruction. The plan would be to add 5th grade also?
Yeah, and this is the way we've talked about as a building, is this is a pilot year. So we're doing it with the intention of getting data on how it works, and what works well and what doesn't, so that we can refine it in whatever way that means for 18-19. Feels an awful far away.
Be here before we know it. It's interesting though that it's just unusual to have a pilot be the majority of the school.
Yeah, and that's what. So I said I was committed to 1 grade doing it so that we could have enough data to make an informed decision, rather than like continuing to talk about what might be hard about it, or what might be great about it, but not really know. And one team opted in, and then another team was jazzed about it as well. So that's where we ended up with the 2. The last piece that's supporting that math piece, you may have heard that we were fortunate enough to have Everyday Math come and look high level at our math practices, and that's informing our professional development for the plan, starting with a full day of math PD tomorrow, which is really exciting, but also just a reprioritization of developing our skills in being instructors of math across the school. And the nice thing about LIFT is we have some teachers that don't teach math daily, but now are closer to students' math data across the grade, even if they're not a daily teacher of math. And so, for example, all our teachers tomorrow, across the grade levels will be participating in that. And we have some other opportunities built into the year as well to support that learning. So I'll stop there before I go into kind of our school climate and culture piece to see if there are other questions about our academic work.
just like to know a little bit more about how you're supporting reading and the humanities.
Yeah. So it's a really big question.
I know. Sorry.
No.
I guess I understand that the decision, that the call to focus on math because that's where the greatest need is. I just worry, that then over time there's a lot less focus on, and I'm thinking about a whole kid, balanced kid.
To give you a little bit of as much historical context as I can give you, which is 3 years in the district and a year and a half at Mass Landing. Reading and writing instruction is 2x the number of minutes per day that math is, and our professional development in part because we have an amazing pair of coaches who support reading and writing instruction. I would say reading and writing has been prioritized. And in fact, I believe that's in the audit findings it's not just my perspective, but also researchers from the University of Chicago looking at our practices that we've unfortunately deprioritized math in the effort to raise reading and writing instruction. When I look at our data as a building, we have teachers. I had a teacher who had 80% of her students hit their growth target last year in reading. I mean, I feel like do a fabulous job of growing kids as readers and writers. And this, the question you bring up really was a point of deep discussion with the leadership team of like, should it be on the document, right? Do we put it there to show that we still value it? And they said, Emily, we're going to continue to do the work we've done. Like that learning isn't lost. We're so fortunate to have teachers go to Teachers College for extended training and to continue to. I have 3 teachers that will be going later this month. That prioritization, I would say, or value still exists. But this is, the team, my leadership team and myself saying, for the time being, this is where we're really focusing our attention, recognizing that right now it's not getting equitable treatment. It's kind of how I would see it with the other curricular areas we have in the building.
So I guess I'm thinking big picture, like there's a discussion earlier about marketing to our community who might be considering private school alternatives. And so I guess I would just ask that as we communicate what's happening at Mass Landing, it's, really focusing on improving in math where we noticed there was a need and continuing our great work. Because, I know as a parent, I've got a kid who needs enrichment in reading and writing because she loves it. And if she were to feel, if I were looking at where do I want to send my kid to school and I saw math, we're jazzed about math, I would be like, oh man, she's not going to be excited there. So I just, in terms of marketing communications, I know that's not your job, but I'm just.
Well, and I think something I hear, so we're in the unique position this year, about 10% of our student body is new to our school or the district. And I had parents who came and said, we looked at all Cumberland County schools and we chose Freeport because we felt like it was well-rounded. We felt like it was the district that saw kids as kids and provided them rigorous academics. And I hope that's what people who aren't new to our district feel when they come to our school, that we, we're going to target our focus. Just like if my focus was to get healthier, I'd want to be picking something more specific than like, hey, I'm going to be healthier when I'm standing in front of you in 6 months. I'd say like, I want to run a faster 10K or deadlift more weight or whatever it may be. I see this as the same way, right? It's a way of ensuring that we have attention somewhere so that we can push growth. But I think one of the beauty, and it's the reason my kids are going to go through the system, is because we support raising kids who have a broad, range of skills and interests and abilities, and we support all those avenues.
I really like your answer. Thank you.
No problem.
Now, I would say that to follow up on what Maddie was saying, maybe your school profile could highlight the fact that we balance all of the content areas and that we put effort into all of them. I mean, I understand why this is focused on the specific needs, the way we look at them.
Yeah,
but for the outside eye, it would be good in the profile to see more than just
this would be a perfect segue to our second goal. Is now a good time? Because I was just thinking of our school profile and what a parent who's new to our district gets, and I would say half of it actually is on the stuff that I'm just about to talk about. As you may recall, last year, and and Julie will talk about this to some extent as well, we've really put some K-5 effort into a framework called Responsive Classroom. If you're not familiar with that, it's really a foundation for establishing 3 things that I think are really important: engaging academics, a positive climate in schools, and effective management in classrooms. And so it supports all the other, I think of it as the thing that supports all the other things that we're doing. And the part that we focused last year on was morning meeting. And so this means that every student every day begins their day with a 20-minute meeting that always includes a greeting. Every student should hear their name every morning. Some type of share. It might be one student sharing a lot about themselves with students asking questions and learning interpersonal skills. It might be every student sharing a little bit about themselves, and then concluding with an activity, which might be something that's woven into the academics they're doing for the day. It might just be something that's about having fun together, but that was a really we saw a lot of value in ensuring kids start their day that way, and that it sets the rest of their day up for success, and also is really a proactive piece in building a positive school culture and climate for the rest of the day as well. So last year was really a focus on implementation of morning meeting, and I'm excited that in large part because Mass Landing teachers were just thrilled to have this model. Implementation was rather seamless. In other words, if you walk into any classroom at 9 o'clock any day, you'll see all our kids in morning meeting. And then we also had the opportunity, we trained half of our teachers in June 16, and the other half all had the opportunity in June 17 to attend a 4-day training that goes into some of the deeper structures that support that framework. This year is about a refinement year, right? So we kind of have the structures now in place, but this year is thinking more critically about how we utilize those structures to support some of the goals we have in the building. So a few examples of those. One is looking at how we can use morning meeting more thoughtfully to connect to academics in the school day, and that's actually some work that Julie and I don't know if you're going to talk about it tonight, but that Julie and I are going to do cross-building. Others are looking at how we can use Responsive Classroom as a framework for how we approach kids who are misbehaving. And so a handful of us from Mass Landing are going to a conference later this year, and we'll be sharing that learning. And then as part of that work, we're also doing a book study of a text called The Power of Our Words, which is really about how we use language with kids, primarily to be proactive in establishing a positive climate. And one of the things I consistently heard over the course of my first year at Mass Landing was a sense that the school wanted really a stronger sense of school-wide expectations to better support kids in how they should act when they're at school. And so last year, students actually created school-wide expectations. You can see the photo of it up on our website. But we had a student-led process that created school-wide expectations, and those now are infused in what we do. So if you walk into the gym class, you'll see our school-wide expectations, and that language being infused, like what does it mean to be safe here? What does it mean to be fair in gym or in classrooms, for that matter? And so we've done some work around language to create clarity for kids, and also using that clarity so that we can be proactive in creating a safe and positive climate for kids. And so the back half of that sheet details some of the steps we're taking in those areas. The last one you'll see on the very bottom, it is a note just about Tier 1 and Tier 2 processes for responding to students who engage in misbehavior. And one area of need we have is being more intentional when a student is struggling and needs support and might have skills gaps that are impacting their ability to behave appropriately in a classroom, what avenues we have to support that student in developing those skills. So some of the things our SAT team is doing is looking at what some other local districts are using, both at the Tier 1 level, which is really thinking like in the classroom, what supports could we put in place to help kids develop the skills they need to function effectively in the classroom, and then at the Tier 2 level, which may involve, as you know, even services that are outside the classroom, for example, meeting with a social worker, or getting some explicit social thinking work or executive functioning support as well. But those are pieces we're trying to put in place because they're holes in what we have right now. So, questions?
Any other questions for Emily? Valley?
Sure. Emily, the baseline data you will be collecting in November.
Yes.
How will you collect that? And when will we be able to see it?
Yes,
Can you
so-
share it when you have it?
Yes, I will share it when I have it. One of the learnings from last year is we did a survey, and then we were like, we did not front load that with students well enough. Because most of them haven't taken surveys before. So what we did is the leadership team pulled a couple tools that have been used nationally. So there's an organization called Panorama that Kim Marshall, who's connected to our professional growth and evaluation system, is a strong supporter of. There's a student climate survey out of Harvard called Tripod, and then PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, which is there's a national organization that is connected to that work. We looked at those surveys and pulled items from those surveys, which I think is going to better help us set up the survey. And then the other thing is we will be doing some front loading with students to explain, like, for example, for a third grader, what does it mean to feel like you belong? Like, what does that really mean? So when kids are responding, that we all have consensus around what they're responding to. Right. Yes.
Not like, oh no, I belong in my house.
Yes.
I don't belong to the school.
Yes.
I belong to my parents.
Yes.
That's not what we were
like
asking.
a little too, yes,
Yeah.
it's a little too literal. But I'd be glad to share that data once we get it.
Jen.
I just have a question about the responsive classroom. That sounds awesome. Is there anything that follows through into like middle school? Because I really think that that's one area where like we give all of these young kids like this sense of belonging and telling them, you know, good morning. And then, I mean, I taught middle school. It seems to start falling short at that point where people just expect like, hey, come in the classroom, sit down, you know, get out your notebooks, and we lose that sense of connection with the kids. So does that continue on through the upper level grades?
So organizationally, so the Center for Responsive Schools, which leads this, you know, the development and refinement of this work and has for about 3 decades, does have a middle school framework. Our middle school does use, so my first year at the middle school, which would have been 3.5 years ago, the very first thing I was tasked with was looking at the implementation of it's called an advisory model. So it looks like, they don't call it morning meeting, partly to be kind of more developmentally responsive to where a 13-year-old is. But the middle school does have an advisory model. That is, so that is what they there's no circle rug. The games are a little different, but there is an advisory model at the middle school that reflects that. The thing about responsive classroom, though, is at its core, a morning meeting is just one small part of what that model is. And at some point, maybe Julie and I can talk about some of the other pieces that are more nuanced, but really, I would say as important, if not more important, than just having that, you know, time in the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You still awake?
Julie. Last but certainly not least.
Like Emily, I'm usually in bed by now, so.
We all are, except on Wednesdays.
Okay, so similarly to how Emily approached this, I'm going to kind of update on last year's because they roll into this year's. And so for those of you who were here last year at this time when I was kind of rolling out what our goals were, we were entering into this time as like these are going to be multi-year goals because I just truly believe people have only the capacity for so much learning in any one given year moment. And like the conversation about are we doing math and reading and everything else, we are all the time, but to target our learning and transfer is hard to keep momentum going, and I think that's part of our learning this year in terms of how I've moved the goals forwards. So entering into last year, we identified 3 main kind of buckets of what we were working on. One of our goals is around the culture and climate, and just to keep improving our proactive strategies to increase engagement and build a positive community, and the effective management, which is the responsive classroom. Looking at goal setting with students so that students own their learning instead of learning being done to them, as a means for building independence and academic ownership for kids. And then strengthening our RTI processes. So those are our 3 umbrella areas for our goals. So our first goal, all 3 goals that were set last year were really around implementation. Our first goal was our responsive classroom goal, and we're kind of a year ahead of Mars Landing, which is good for kids in lots of ways as we're feeding our kids that way. The previous year, like last year, Emily was working a morning meeting. We did that whole year before, and last year we were focusing on our teacher language. And so the goal was really to think about, are all our teachers using this language? And it's one of the hardest things to work on because habits are hard to change. But through observation and teachers reporting on things, and we did a book study, much like Mars Landing are doing this year. We did that last year. Everyone is really making a conscious effort to shift how we're talking to students and how we're encouraging that and promoting independence and positive reinforcement to them through how we speak to them. And we had a day's visit. Part of the package, when you get the 4-day training, come to your school, you have an option for a follow-up. We selected to have a responsive classroom consultant come back and observe in our school for the day to give us some feedback. We have the benefit of having Paul White, one of our kindergarten teachers on staff, who's a responsive classroom consultant, and he actually did both of the trainings for both schools. But it was what we decided together was that it would be good to have a fresh set of eyes because he's living it every day, and it's hard sometimes to separate from what you see around you. So we got some good feedback from that visit around what was happening in the school around teacher language and what was being observed, and also some good insights as to where we might go next. So that input really helped us think about what this year's goal would look like. And so our shift is going from, although we continue to build our community, into the more engaging academics. And so we are doing another book study this year on a book called The Joyful Classroom, and it's really looking at how are we promoting positive, engaging interactions for students. One practice that Responsive Classroom promotes is also goal setting. So it kind of, we're weaving everything in together. So our second goal last year was around goal setting with students, and the expectation for teachers was that they're at least doing it in one core subject area. And the learning that ended up happening, a lot of people, the teachers got stuck in the how. How am I going to do this with 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds? And some people were able to, build it in a fluid way. Others really had a hard time getting over the logistics about how this is going to work. And so last year really was about implementation. Let's just do it, jump in, see how it goes, and then learn and reflect on how we're going to build that practice so that we're seeing the results in our results in our data, really. So last year it was I would expect everyone to report that they're doing it. And this year we want to really look that practice is effective and it's moving students. And so our learning this year will be around using it as a feedback loop for students. What kind of feedback in a formative way are we giving them, and how are we moving them and adjusting those goals so that we're meeting students where they're at and what their next steps are, because there's always a next, where are we going next? And so that students know where they are and they know what they need to do and they know why they're doing it. So we're just starting to kind of move from, okay, now I'm doing it, to now I'm getting better at it and I'm going to see results in it. So you'll see on this year's goal that our data is in there as the goal, and that goal setting has become an action step to try and move that data. I'll come back to talk about the data in a moment because there's a lot of things I need to explain around what's there. So goal 3 was really around our RTI process, and there were a lot of messy parts, shall I say, in how we were doing things, and so we really needed to clean up process. When do kids move into needing those extra services at Tier 1 and Tier 2? How are we identifying them? How are we writing goals that really target their needs to move them? All those kinds of things. And we cleaned up a lot of things last year. But on reflection, there were pieces that as an SAT team, we did really well, and we thought we had communicated lots of things to lots of people, and we thought we were good to go. But in reality, there was a lot of mopping up that we ended up having to do because we hadn't supported the transfer to teachers to be doing what they needed to do. So we really feel like that's a continuous goal that we're still working on and doing better at. One of the pieces for this year, so the data is specifically to increase the growth in those students who are identified at that tier 2 level, so that we can be moving our instruction and be more targeted with what we're doing. So one of the pieces that we're implementing this year, like at Mars Landing, we have a flex block, so flex for us, lift for them, but same thing. The only thing we're kind of treading a little more lightly in this, because I don't have that extra time to give to teachers to commit to the planning around it. So with that in mind, I've asked teams to think about one content area to tackle, and let's just kind of run the system and see how we go, knowing that I don't have that additional time to give them, so that we have a lot of moving parts. So first grade are focusing on math specifically, and second grade are focused on spelling to really differentiate and be able to push the kids who need pushing, support students who need something different, and then keep our middle or average learners moving in whatever they need to keep targeting. And hopefully it will evolve over the course of the year, and we'll kind of, once we can run or walk or crawl, we'll start adding more parts. And then kindergarten have a time assigned and scheduled into their calendar, or schedule rather, sorry, it's late. But we're gonna wait before we, it's still early days for K, they're still settling into school and just getting used to being at school and the expectations that are put upon them. And so, we'll be looking more into February to think about how we're going to use that time in kindergarten classrooms. So going back to the data, particularly on goal 2, so we did choose to have a reading and a math goal because of what the data presented for us at the end of last year was a big learning piece for us. So up until this point, so F&P is our primary measure at the K2 level for reading development. We don't have standardized tests that we're giving, and so that's a really big indicator for us about how our students are growing. We, for the first time, typically we've only focused on benchmark data, and our numbers have always looked pretty good. So over the past 3, 4, even before I came, most of our benchmarking was looking in the 80s, high 80% that we were getting students to meet benchmark. This year, we've focused on growth, and we set growth targets. And so, as you'll see, our baseline data doesn't look great. I think it's 47%, isn't it? And so there was a couple of variables that went into that. So we're not comparing apples to oranges. The test itself changed. So we were using data from a slightly different version of the same assessment. And we also administered it with an assessment team. So prior to that, classroom teachers had assessed their own students and reported out their data. This year, or last year, spring, we used assessment teams. So we trained a SWAT team, if you like, to come in, give those assessments to all kids. So I feel like this is our baseline, and this is kind of clean data, and then hopefully we'll see the growth we would want to from moving forwards. And I think 75% is a lofty goal. So, we might be looking at multiple years to really shift that number. But I think there were so many variables in us coming up with that, having that number as a growth point, because we're not comparing the same test to the same test, and the situation where students were assessed were not the same. But it's been a good learning experience for us as our teachers really own that, and they were able to dig in and look at where we fell short, and we really realized that comprehension is where that arm of the reading that we are not necessarily supporting our students well enough, and so that's where we're focusing. A lot of our TC work this year is all focused around and the data across the schools looked similar. This isn't just Moore Street kind of having this, and this was a big shock for us across the district. Our data at the K2 level was surprising for a lot of teachers. And so our TC work district-wide is focusing comprehension-wise to really bring that up for all students. Our math data, so again, this was the first year we really focused on growth. And that's an assessment that's been developed for K2 to measure student growth. So the essential learnings for each of those grade levels has been identified, and then they're assessed at the beginning of the year, and then growth targets are set based on what they assessed at. And our data looked pretty good. 93% I'm really pleased with, and based on our cohort has changed, so we've lost our second grade, we have a new kindergarten coming into that number. We felt that kind of 90% is, it's not that we don't want 93, and it's not that we don't think we can't get 93, but once you're in those high percentages, it's hard to maintain it. And with a shifting cohort, 90% just left us thinking about staying in that ballpark. The data in that measure, so the whole school measure, is every student in the building. So that includes special ed, it includes anyone who has been identified for RTI. And then in the RTI measure, that's specifically students who were identified for Tier 2 longer term support in grades 1 and 2. I should have probably been more specific in that. It wasn't, so that doesn't include special ed. It only includes those students who were identified and received Tier 2 instruction for more than 6 weeks. It was a longer period of time.
We're looking at goal 3?
Yeah, so that's the RTI one. That one is only Tier 2 students.
And you said it's only first and second
Yes.
grade, not the kindergarten, but for the baseline for the goal 2, that includes kindergartners?
K2, yeah.
Okay.
So it says, so the baseline is spring, 60% of students identified for RTI Tier 1 or 2 met the expected growth.
Mhm.
So is that different than what the goal is?
So no, the goal is still 1 or 2, but the data reflects those ones. So in order to have Tier 2, they're also getting Tier 1, like it's layered. So those students are getting a lot. The data point is from those students last year who were receiving Tier 2.
So that's 60% number?
Yes.
Okay, so it's really 1 and 2, right? Because you could have 1 but not 2, but you can't have 2 without 1. So these 60 have 1 and 2. Got it.
Yeah. Any questions?
I had because the SLO was a new thing, in the last couple of years, and I was wondering when you see such a stark difference in sort of where you thought you were from reading to this, is it that we set an SLO that was just crazy out of the ballpark, impossible? I mean, did we set our growth target too high and that our kids are where we expect them to be, but we were just too lofty in our aspirations?
Well,
if that's possible.
My hypothesis really is, and maybe I'll come back with egg on my face next year, but I really think we were comparing apples to oranges, and so our baseline for our growth wasn't the same as how we were measuring did they meet it or not.
Okay.
And so some of those, the original data points were potentially
skewed.
Inflated. Yeah. And the assessment shifted. So there definitely has been a shift in the expectations around the comprehension at lower levels.
Okay.
So Julie, what is the SLO specifically? Is it an assessment that flows out of the everyday math program, or how did you structure the SLO? I mean, what kind of an assessment is it?
So it's, do you have way more detail around that than I do?
Well, I think you said it's about the essential learning
Yeah.
for the grade level, and it is based on programs.
And everyday math.
Yeah.
Okay.
And use the end of year, each of the grade levels has an end of year assessment in the program, and they use some of those.
Didn't Lisa and Tate work on that?
Yeah.
So they created that. Lisa's has a math background. And so, that will be something we'll have to monitor and keep reflecting on. I mean, that is a really high number of 93%. Is that SLO rigorous enough? And it's why I think when we've probably talked about PEPG in the past, everybody starts out wanting to create their own SLO, and they quickly get into, oh no, we don't mind using the F&P because it's, or the NWEA or the MEA because, it's hard to write a good assessment, right? And so when one's been written and vetted for you, it's far more reliable to go with that. So if we keep seeing a super high number there, we may have to go back and make the assessment more rigorous. So this is truly a baseline number, and that's the first time we've ever used that assessment.
Right.
So is there anything else off the shelf that you have considered for the SLO other than this assessment that we designed in-house?
For math?
For math, yeah.
So
that's
that's kind of a district-wide question, and we haven't, right?
Okay.
I mean, so there are things out there like the NWEA goes down to first grade, right? So that is something that we could, look at some point. There are pros and cons to that, right? So the assessment that's been created is very close to our instruction, right? Because it aligns with our program.
And are we giving the same assessment in Pownell, Moore
Yes.
Street, and Durham? So they're all getting the same
Yes,
assessment.
it is.
The difference with the math, though, is that the decision was made that we're not using a team. Or, I'm not even sure we talked about it. With the reading, we're using a team. So the team has been trained. The team goes to Pownell, Durham, and Moore Street. And then there's somebody background scoring to kind of make sure, even in the moment, that people are making good decisions. So I feel like the reading data is really clean. Teachers administered the math.
Isn't there more subjective, though, in the reading? So, there
More
are some
subjective. Yes and no's. Math
wouldn't you
tends
think,
to be,
like-
did you get it or you didn't?
But I'm saying versus
wouldn't.
math, like if these are the skills and
No, because there are really the F&P is more vetted, right? And they give you very clear guidelines about what meets and what doesn't.
Yeah, okay.
And you get into an open-ended math question. For example, what Cynthia even showed on the MEA,
but
and
first graders aren't getting that, are they?
Sure, you can. Yeah, they have to explain their thinking. And you get into that, and you get teachers assessing that, and it's like, oh, I think I'm going to give them a point there.
I know what they meant.
Yeah.
My kid tells me that she knew what I meant. I'm like, no.
But going back to the assessment itself, my concern is that if we feel that we have inflated numbers, then we're going to make these SLO more strict, and as we make it more strict, then that throws off our baseline. So how many years will it take to, hone into this assessment that we're creating so that it will be valuable? So rather than go through all that trouble, maybe consider something that has already been foolproof by somebody else that seems to be working for other
Well, it's
people.
another standardized testing, right? And so, that's something we grapple with, and it's something some of you have pushed back on, right? Like, I think we're testing too much.
Well,
we're
it's
testing
being
them
tested anyway.
I know. Yeah,
I mean,
no,
this
I
is
get
a
it. I get
test.
it.
I'm
Yes.
just saying, instead of using this test that we're refining ourselves, that may take a lot of time and a lot of trial and error and throw off the baseline year after year, using that same time for a different assessment.
No, and please don't hear me that I'm opposed to what you're saying. It's just that you have to remember when we arrived last year that there wasn't, I don't think we had any SLOs created. So they all had to be in place for this September. So going forward, we might look at that if we, keep questioning our data. I mean, it's something that I think schools throughout the state really grapple with at the youngest grades, don't you, Julie?
So student learning objectives. I just realized I'm not sure we said what an SLO was for folks that are new and maybe aren't as entrenched just yet, but you will be. I guess I thought my understanding of the SLO was that it was supposed to be based on specific information for the kids you were teaching. It's not sort of a standardized test. It's like, this is what these 15 kids have, and this is what their objective is, not like. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like that meshes with a standardized test.
So you can use in fact, we're required by statute to use the MEA as part of the assessments that we use to look at teacher growth. So you can do it either way. And we only do the MEA starting in third. So we can only use it 4 through 8 because you have to be able to show growth. But
right.
No, or not the MEA. But I'm responding to Michelle's question about isn't it better for the SLOs to be closer to what the everyday teaching is? And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. It's really hard to write a good assessment, which is what Valley is talking about, and keep refining it at the same time that you're trying to use this data to show student growth and how we're doing as a district. Because, of course, every time you refine it, then you're not comparing apples to apples.
But also, I just heard you say that the NWA, which could be administered for grade 2 and lower, is very closely aligned with EDM, Everyday Math, which is the program that we use for instruction. So it shouldn't be that we're testing our kids with a test that's not aligned to our instruction model. We have an instruction model that actually is pretty close to what they would be tested with, something like the NWA.
So I think we said that the SLO was based on Everyday Math.
No, NWA.
And it's not that the NWEA isn't testing some of that, but I guess I wouldn't go on record and say that, well, I know I haven't done an alignment myself to see how closely that's aligned. But it is based upon, national norms of.
Which presumably Everyday Math
right.
is, right?
Yes.
So does anyone in Everyday Math, could anyone there be a resource to help us select an assessment that works with that program?
They have assessments already with the program, but it's a bigger conversation than for tonight. But there was, Lisa was involved in Lisa, who was a former math coach, excuse me, and Tate, who did I really? They did a lot of work, and they looked at the standards, and they really focused on those power standards, and they used the end of year assessments, and there's a couple of units. There's other assessments. So they looked at it was tricky for kindergarten particularly, but they looked at, do you want to give the end of year, because you have a pre and a post. So kindergarten's coming in with not a lot, and so do you want to put this assessment in front of a 5-year-old that has what they're going to learn for the whole year at the beginning of the year, and have them just cry. And so they did a lot of work on kind of tiering it up, and what is it going to look like, and we don't even start it in September. We do theirs a little bit later. So there was lots and lots of discussion. We met as grade levels across the district. All the kindergarten teachers were together across the district with Tate, and then the first grade, second grade. So they went through several iterations of it, and it was a process. And with any SLO, depending on what you're seeing for data and data trends, you may need to modify that. So that's just where we're at. We're 1 year in. I guess that's the quick version of it.
So it is based on everyday math.
So just for kicks, my second graders, 90% of them on the SLO met or exceeded the growth target. Oh, I'm not going to give you comparison data. Oh, ignore what I was about to say. But 77% of second graders met like the average or higher on the NWEA, but I don't have growth because that's the baseline for third grade. But ignore what I started then. Yeah. Don't write it. It was going
Cross
down
it
the
off.
wrong road.
Because later you're going to be like, what is she talking about there?
No.
Any other questions for Julie?
I just have a question because I remember talking about student learning objectives, but I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Think of it just okay. Let's call it a test. It's an assessment.
And we have these for every grade level and every math and reading.
Well, we have it. I'm looking at Cynthia for confirmation because I want to be sure about what I'm saying. We have started them for every teacher.
Started what? I was just
The SLOs. Every teacher has a test that they're using, right? And that they have given this fall as a baseline, right? Because I know we were finalizing in September. But are we done now?
We are done.
So every one of our teachers has to have by statute this September that just came, some type of assessment that they're using to show student growth. Pre-K through 12.
It's part of the evaluation.
Every subject, art, music, STEM, science,
but even
social
more than
studies.
just each teacher, because I mean a K through 5 teacher does everything, right? They're doing math, they're doing English.
So it may be a K through 5 teacher might be using, you don't have to have it in every subject area. So we might be, in like 4th grade, we might be using the MEA and the NWEA in math and reading.
And this is tied to the professional growth.
Right,
Yes.
the assessment,
And
the
evaluation.
evaluation of the teachers.
Okay, but here we're just we are tying it to a goal.
School growth.
Absolutely.
Because why have
School
Right.
all these
Right.
other
Right.
things going
And-
on at the same time?
Because we don't have, especially at this grade level for math, we don't have an assessment.
Well, it
other
is
than
an
the SLO.
assessment. Think of it, it is an assessment. But some people, and in some areas it's called SLO, but it's just, they're synonymous. It's a test.
Right. Would you call it a standardized test?
No.
Right.
No, I wouldn't, because it's not given. No, we're going to try to get it standardized, but that takes a lot of vetting. So I would not call it a standardized test.
But are they the same test across the district?
Yes.
So every 4th grade teacher is giving the same test,
Correct.
Yes.
pre
K
and
two.
post.
And
Correct.
So in kindergarten, and like if you're a second grader, you're sitting down with a test? Is it like a test?
But sometimes it
Well,
could be a test they're already
right.
taking.
It is.
And
the
so,
second grade.
yeah, and think about on the F&P that we talked about tonight, that's given one-on-one, right? So the teacher's having this student read in order to check their accuracy and fluency, right? And so it's all given at the lower levels orally, right? And as you go up in the grades, it would be a test where it's written.
And that's true of math as well. They would orally ask them questions, and they might have.
Not on the math. No, that would be written.
In kindergarten, we do. In kindergarten, it's a one-on-one because it's a lot of show me counting kind of pieces. But first and second, it's a paper pencil.
And in art, they're drawing.
Right.
So how long is that test? What does that look like in 1st and 2nd grade for a math test?
Half an hour. So So students K2 are doing end of unit assessments all the time. So this doesn't, when they're given this doesn't look foreign. This is like monthly, every 6 weeks, they're doing a paper pencil assessment. So
And if it makes you feel any better, my second grader does these things, test assessments all the time, and I've been volunteering when they're doing it, and some kids are lying on the rug doing it, others are sitting on a ball. I mean, it's not this foreboding, stressful experience that you may be imagining.
Right. Yeah.
But I just want to get some feedback back to you guys. I love the way that you've tied in last year's goals to this year's goals, and it's all a continuum. That's great. I also love the fact that you're focusing on both academic and school culture goals. And I love the fact that these goals are truly SMART goals, actionable, measurable, all those good things. So thank you. Good work.
And like Emily said, our work, responsive classroom wise, we're really trying to do more pre-K5 and to really kind of carry those same messages through between schools. So it's been good.
Okay. I just have 2 questions. You mentioned that you're using FMP, I don't know, this is my notes, developed expected growth targets. What am I talking about? Sorry. It's late and I can't read my shorthand. You're using as a baseline FMP spring 2017, 47% students met or exceeded expected growth targets. The growth targets are something that the staff developed, or it's FMP?
No, those were determined through the FMP assessment. Like if a student is at this level, what would a year's worth of growth look like?
And then the other one was just, I think you mentioned that at one point in your presentation that one of the things you're having trouble with is finding time to support planning, and I was wondering what is the challenge there?
So we share our specialists with Pownell, which gives us, which is fine, but what it means is we only have one opportunity for common planning time, and I believe you have extra time. That's where that came from, right? You have additional specialist time. So we have just enough or close to just enough to meet contractual obligations for planning, and so to call something extra, I don't have any wiggle room or room in the specialist time that they are in our building to provide that for teachers.
Would they be really involved with the flex time, though, if it's primarily, so maybe I'm thinking the wrong specialist. I'm thinking, yes, those specialists.
Right, so in order to give classroom teachers time, that's where they get it. When kids are at their specials.
I see. Okay, gotcha. I was thinking they didn't need to be involved in the conversation, but I see that's where the kids
how
are.
Classroom teachers get their time.
That's important. Thank you.
Okay.
Supposed to let other people have opportunities to ask another question.
I think you're good.
Okay. So I guess I will want to know more about how that can be solved for you, and is it simply adding more time for specialists at your school in your building, or is it not that simple?
It's really simple. If we had early release Wednesdays. And thank you for that opportunity. So it is a theme that all administrators, we just started our budget meetings. Was that yesterday?
It feels like a while ago.
Yeah. And, it is a common theme across that, they're dying at the building level for more collaborative time.
Can we assume that Pownell has the same issue? Because they have the other half
I think it's across the district.
Well, but I'm just saying in terms of planning, specifically around the flex block time or whatever.
So I don't want like you to take away from what I just said, it's because we share with Pownell. Part of the challenge of sharing specialists is that I don't have time. I don't have all the specialists in the building at the same time, apart from one opportunity across the week. So the fact that we're sharing isn't the problem. It just creates
Right, but presumably it
less
creates the same,
Yes.
the same lack of flexibility on their side as too.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. Everybody good with Julie? All right.
Thank you.
Public comment? No?
No.
We do it twice. It's at the beginning too. No, that was the guidance counselors. They were, yeah.
And the grub.
Yes, and grubs. So I would take a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Valley, Kate, all in favor? Adjourn. Thank you. Good night.
Agreement. 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 Agreement.